Is at www.youtube.com/JLWARREN. My name is Randolph Richardson. I'm an atheist from British Columbia, Canada, and I'm the founding president of the Canadian Atheists, an organization that advocates for freedom, fair justice, and critical thinking. You can find out more about the Canadian Atheists at www.canadianatheists.ca. The IX is a Tom Unboxes subscriber and former atheist community of Discord administrator who enjoys long walks through evolutionary biology-inspired computer science, archaeological, academic, biblical criticism, and so on. Jack Burton is self-described as a middle-aged, college-educated nobody who drives the Pork Chop Express truck in his spare time. He's a deist and mostly non-committal to philosophical stances. Peter de Tucker is an atheist from the Netherlands who handles the production of various YouTube channels, including Arn Roz, and generously contributes his professional artistic skills for free to atheists all around the world. Peter's YouTube channel is at www.youtube.com/gonnagoforit. King Xerxes is an atheist activist and political commentator who has extensive knowledge of the Holy Bible and the history surrounding it. He has a YouTube channel which is in the YouTube video's description. Taco is a #1 Discord debater who has never lost a debate in his life. He's also the organizer of this event. So thank you everybody for joining us, and did anybody have anything you wanted to announce before we begin our presentation?
Not much. Thank you for handling the intros there. I just linked Peter's because I forgot to do his earlier, so I got that pin in there too.
Before we kick off, how's everybody? How are y'all doing? It's been a couple of weeks, or it's been like a month since I've seen y'all because I had to miss the last one because I was out of town. But how's everybody doing?
Well, I did notice you popped in for a few seconds there last time. Thanks for doing that. Doing pretty good. I was just in a debate with a Muslim on Friday, just 2 days ago, on Modern Day Debate, and we were arguing debating whether Islam or atheism is better for the world. So there's of course people on each side think that one of us won. Some think I won, some think he won, and as it is with debates, I always learn from them. So I'm looking forward to reviewing it later. And so what's new with you?
Not much. Just been busy. The podcast and the channel are seeing some good spikes, and of course, getting content out. But just been busy. The podcast side of it, the horror film podcast that I do is kind of blowing up on the production side, and it's requiring a lot of my attention as far as writing goes, and doing stuff I can't talk about just yet. But hopefully, I'll be able to do some big reveals. But just busy. But it's a good problem to have,
Well, please let me know if I can help promote it or be helpful in some other way. Even coming on as a guest, I'll be happy to do that. TJump, how are you? What's new with you? Okay. All right. Hey, I see we've got Otangelo here. You've remember last fortnight you were here, and it was suggested that you perhaps review a few things, and I'm wondering how you're doing. Hope you've been having a good weekend so far.
I'm fine, thanks, guys. What's up?
But the sky and the rent. But
doing well, Otangelo. We're glad to have you here, man.
Thanks.
So, what do you have for us today, Otangelo?
Okay, the argument for God's existence, which I'm most familiar with, which I most study, is the teleological argument, and in special, what relates to the origin of life. And what I am learning is that The fine-tune argument doesn't relate only to the origin of the universe and the requirement of fine-tuning, but it extends down to the molecular level and to biochemistry. And there is a book which came out in '96 from David Goodsell. The book name is Our Molecular Nature. And he describes here an enzyme. The name is aspartate carbamoyl transferase. And that enzyme is employed in the biosynthesis of the nucleobases in DNA. And he goes into the details to describe this enzyme. And he says, I quote here, the entire complex is composed that in regards of that enzyme of over 40,000 atoms, each of which plays a vital role. The handful of atoms that actually perform the chemical reaction are the central players. So he describes in details, I will not go into it, that even on an atomic scale, each atom in such an enzyme has to be at the right place and finely tuned. And it is made of about 40,000 atoms. Now, a neuron cell has about 175 trillion atoms. Okay, so
I don't think so either. So, Otangelo, you come here every week with the exact same argument, and so I'm curious. Other than I don't know, therefore God, have you found any evidence that there is a God?
well,
I'm actually kind of curious, like to piggyback off of that, Otangelo, how is your argument, no matter what you add into it or what names you actually mispronounce that transferase, but how is it that no matter what you're saying there, how is it not just an argument from incredulity?
Yes, I am actually. Okay, first, I am actually incredule that non-intelligent mechanisms can arrange atoms to make a molecular machine that has to be even finely tuned on an atomic level, and then performs a reaction which you cannot explain by evolution because it is required to make DNA, which is an abiogenesis problem. It is so you cannot invoke evolution. The only alternative that you have is actually chance or unguided random events. So I'm incredule that chance would be capable to make a molecule or an enzyme of this sophistication by unguided means. And then what does it do? It makes nucleobases, which also have an atomic arrangement, which is one in a million.
Otangelo.
And
all of us, Otangelo, all of us have heard this before because you present the same thing every single time, and it's always going to go back to the original question. And I'll have to ask this: how many times did the process? Because you say you're incredulous to how this could just come about, how the system that currently propagates life. You are incredulous to the idea or to the possibility that this could have arisen by random chance. Okay. Because in your mind, it only happened once. Like it occurred once, and it's like you roll the dice one time, and you roll Yahtzee with all the dice standing on top of each other, and that's what you're equating the odds to. But I have to ask you, how did you determine that the process by which life propagates, that these things conjoined, how many times did it fail before it succeeded on the planet? As the planet was forming and all of these elements were together and they do what they do naturally that we've observed in nature and in the lab, we know what it does. Okay. So how many times did the process fail until the parameters of the environment were just right to where it could finally succeed and then take off from there?
Well, what I'll say now, JL, I've said that previously in other interactions. What scientific experiments demonstrate is not the complexification of atoms and molecules, but its disintegration.
No, that doesn't answer the question, Otangelo. I'm saying that the parameters by which these elements could come together and do what they do naturally, within specific parameters. The parameters don't come around all that often. Okay, that essentially the laboratory environment has to be pretty much perfect, or within very, very specific parameters in order for these things to take place naturally, to facilitate the production of DNA and result in life. Okay, but the Earth wasn't always in that state. But it doesn't mean that the elements weren't there. And I'm talking about the elements that compose DNA, or that will lead to life. It doesn't mean that those elements weren't on the planet and that they weren't trying to bond and do what they do naturally, but the parameters weren't right. It was too hot. Maybe it was too cold. There wasn't enough moisture. There wasn't, whatever. There were things that precluded it. So what if the process basically it tries to do this naturally, but the window isn't open yet? So how did you determine that it only happened once? How did you eliminate the possibility that it wasn't always trying to do it and the window just happened to open on Earth very briefly, life got started, and then life does what it does. It self-replicates. And then it just goes until it can't self-replicate anymore. How did you determine that it only happened the one time? Because if it happened consistently and kept failing until all of a sudden the window opened, boom, life got started and went, and then that was it.
Yes, that's correct, TJump. Well, TJump, since God is not made of physical parts,
Testing.
He doesn't have to be fine-tuned as a spirit. He can, of course,
But wait,
conceptualize machines which are
Otangelo,
finely
one
tuned.
sec. Go back. So the fine tuning was, remember, there's a large spectrum of ways it could be, and only a small amount of those ways allow for life. Nothing about that says physical. So even if it was all supernatural and there's a large number of ways it could be, and only a small number produce life, it's still fine-tuned. So fine-tuning just means large spectrum, small amount produces life. So there's a large spectrum of gods, only a small amount would produce life. Why? Who fine-tuned God?
Well, we are talking here about physical life. We are talking about cells.
Well, it would still apply to
originate
supernatural
dust.
things. So there's lots of different ways the supernatural world could be. Many of them wouldn't allow for souls. It would just destroy all souls, and only a small number of them would allow for souls. So the fine-tuning problem applies to any state that has a large number of ways it could be, and only a very small number of ways that allow for life, which includes God. God has a large number of ways he could be, and only a small number of ways that allow for a life-creating universe. So the fine-tuning problem applies to all of these things, not just cells and not just atoms and not just chemicals and not just the fine-tuning. It also applies to the spiritual world and to God. So this is why physicists don't really take this as an indication of God, because it applies to literally anything that has multiple states. And so who fine-tuned God? Why is God fine-tuned in such a way to allow for the universe? And if you want to say that, oh, it doesn't apply to God for some other reason, well, then we're not talking about the fine-tuning argument anymore. The fine-tuning doesn't matter. You're saying, oh, well, what matters is he's non-physical. That's what matters. The physical stuff is really all that's there. It doesn't matter that it's fine-tuned. It's physical, and all the physical stuff needs an explanation. So if you want to say that the fine-tuning problem is itself evidence, then you would need to explain, how can the universe be fine-tuned in a way that God isn't fine-tuned? And simply saying that one's physical and one's not doesn't answer the question. There's infinitely many ways the universe could be, and there's infinitely many ways God could be, and only a small number of both could allow for life. So both are fine-tuned.
Well, TJump,
I
since
think
my
we're skipping a
argument,
step. The reason that we're here is that someone convinces us a God exists. We can all agree that all the building blocks for life are present on the planet. The planet is present. Nature is present. The only one thing in Otangelo's example that isn't present is a God.
Antangelo's argument is that
If he
it's
doesn't,
so.
hold on. If God doesn't exist, he didn't fine tune anything. He didn't start off life.
Peter,
he
he's
didn't
making
do
an argument.
Anything.
He's arguing that the things we see, the life we see, can only come about if God designed it. It's so complex, only God could have done it. That's his argument. So he's making an argument.
That is his argument, but for that argument, the first thing he has to demonstrate is that there is a God who can design.
No, that's
and then we can take it from there and see what God did.
No, that's not how arguments work.
I don't care what his argument is. If God doesn't exist, he didn't fine tune.
His argument is trying to show God did exist. He's saying only God could have done this, therefore God.
It's every week the same argument. Let him start with God.
Oh my God, that's what he's doing. That's literally what he's doing, Peter. Peter, if you make an argument for something, you're trying to show the thing exists. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's the same thing. It's an argument from incredulity. He can't see it any other way. So the argument itself is fallacious, just because he's saying that it's so incredibly complex that it couldn't be anything other than God.
Yes, and we'd like to explain that to him. So that's why I asked him the question: who fine-tuned God?
There's no God to fine-tune.
Go ahead.
Well, TJump, since my argument isn't that God as a spirit is fine-tuned, but that physical life and cells are fine-tuned, I don't have to respond to what you try to object, because you are not objecting my argument.
Wait. So Otangelo, when you say the physics is fine-tuned, what you mean is that there's a large number of ways the physics could be, and only a small number are life-threatening, right? That's what you mean when you say the physics is fine-tuned.
That's correct.
Okay, so there's also a large number of ways God could be, and only a small number creates a life-permitting universe. So that would also be fine-tuned, wouldn't it?
Well, again, you are not addressing my argument by resorting that God must be fine-tuned. That's not what I am saying.
No.
I am saying that physical life needs to be fine-tuned.
No. So remember when I first asked, I said that what you mean by fine-tuning is just that there's a large spectrum of the ways things could be, and only a small number produce life. Like that's nowhere does that say physical. Physical doesn't exist in there. Suppose it's the supernatural.
Okay.
Suppose there's supernatural life.
So I am adding TJump to what you said, physical life.
Okay, so suppose there's a supernatural world and it has life, and there's a large number of ways it could be, and only a small number allow for life. Would that also be finely tuned, or would you say that's not fine-tuned?
That's not my argument. Let's get to the argument that they're making.
I'm trying to explain to you how fine-tuning works. So let's try to work with me here. So imagine that there's two worlds. One is a physical world, exactly like ours, where life is fine-tuned, and one is a spiritual world. And the spiritual world has equally as many ways it could be as the physical world, and it has an equally small number of ways that allows for spiritual life. Would you say that is fine-tuned? Would you call that fine-tuned? Could the beings in that universe say, our universe is fine-tuned, therefore God? Could they use the same argument as you, even if they're not physical?
TJump, as I said previously, I don't think that spiritual life needs fine-tuning because it's not made of physical parts.
Just imagine it. So imagine that there is a world where there's a large number of ways the spiritual world could be, and like all of them are just spiritual black holes where it just eliminates all spiritual life, and only a small number of them allows for spiritual life. So a small number has the right conditions to allow for spiritual life. Could they say they're fine-tuned? Could the inhabitants of that world say they're fine-tuned? Would they have an equal justification as you do?
Well, I keep saying again, TJump, I don't know what you don't understand about my answer. I think it is unreasonable to talk about the spirit needing to be finely tuned.
Angelo, this is not hard. Imagine a different kind of spirit than the kinds you believe in. A different kind. So there's physical stuff, there's non-physical stuff, there's super uber physical stuff. There's different kinds of ontologies. So for every kind of ontology that is physical, that is not physical, if they have a large spectrum of possibilities and only a small number allow life, every version who has that condition could claim fine-tuning equally, right? It doesn't need to be physical. That doesn't matter. What matters is if there's a large spectrum of possibilities and a small amount produce life, right? Like you can just imagine there's a different kind of a world that isn't physical, but it's not spiritual either. It's a different kind of new ontology. And in that world, large spectrum of possibilities, small amount produces life. Could they also say they're fine-tuned equally as much as you do? Equally justified?
To me, your thought experiment, TJump, doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Does this make sense to you guys? Are you guys following Randolph, JL, Taco?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Otangelo, TJump is extending off of what your argument is, as far as the fine-tuning assertion is what he's doing. And you keep trying to keep it into one particular field with but TJump is addressing what your argument entails.
The fact
And
that
then
there are more options and you skip all of those options to get to your specific option.
Well, no, I just gave the parameter in which I think my argument applies, and the parameter is that it applies to physical life.
Yes, but the question is why do you think it only applies to physical life? It could also apply to supernatural life. The argument for fine-tuning only means all it says is lots of possibilities, small amount produce this outcome. That is the extent of the fine-tuning argument. It says nothing about physical. And in that case, it also applies to God, it also applies to the spiritual, it also applies to everything. Mm-hmm. So like in the spiritual world, do you think
maybe I can help in your own words, Otangelo, maybe I can help clarify in your own words. If you have a factory that isn't fine-tuned to create life, then we don't have life. This is your example of the factory. If there's a factory that can't create life, then we can't have life. So what fine-tuned the factory to create life?
Well, hang on a second. If God produces things, if God creates things, then God is analogous to a factory that creates things.
Yes.
No, because
that's what I'm trying to explain.
It doesn't matter. They both create things. They're both creators. So if God exists and God creates things like universes, planets, life, whatsoever, if God is a creator thing and factories are defined as things that create things, by that rationale, they're both analogous because they're both creators of things. Now you can go a little bit deeper and say like, well, one is a physical.
It's Otangelo's analogy. Maybe that's a better way to explain it to him. It's his own analogy.
Yeah, spirit is not a factory, Peter. A spirit is not made of parts which constitute a factory.
I believe that's called special pleading.
To explain since the beginning.
So now it's special pleading because according to you, everything is a factory. You equate everything to a factory.
I've never said that, Peter.
What? So he means that everything has a spectrum.
It is just me trying, in your words, to explain what TJump means. And just for the fun of it, you should run with the idea. Maybe then you will figure out what TJump means.
And
because of course, for now, it's all special pleading.
And of course, Otangelo, the whole thing falls apart if we discover life in some other part of the universe. Like if we find it on another planet.
Yeah, that is a materialism of the gaps, GAL.
It's not. That is a possibility. If life is possible, given the mathematics of the universe, if life is possible on this planet, then it is, given the mathematics, it's almost certain that life is possible on another planet, or was possible on another planet, or will be in the future possible on another planet. So all it takes is that window.
If you have the right circumstances, but
right. So
the odds to have a life-permitting planet is also in
wait. Why do we need the right circumstances if it's a God doing this? Can God only do this under the right circumstances?
So you need to have the right circumstance. You have to have a life.
So God is bound by circumstances.
Yeah. So what we're
That's
basically
cool.
saying, Otangelo, is that window that allows for life to occur on a planet could open on another planet, somewhere else in the universe. Given the vastness of the cosmos, mathematically speaking, and the number of systems that are in it, the number of planets that are in it, the number of planets that sit within the habitable range of their star, that allow for this to take place. They don't have to be Earth identical, but life could pop up somewhere else, or it may have already done so and long since gone extinct, or it may have done, or it may do it in the future, given the breadth of time that the universe will be here. So life could pop up long after we're gone. So were there to be life somewhere else, your entire argument falls apart. So it literally is precluded. And we're just saying, we're not saying that this is what will happen. We're simply saying we can't say that your argument is the certainty when you haven't eliminated the possibility that life could be somewhere else, or has been somewhere else, or will be in the future somewhere else.
I can put here in the written chat which one do you guys suggest? General chat, is that okay?
Garbage.
I'll put a link
Garbage
here.
chat.
Put it into the Heathen Hangout, please. Then I can reshare it to YouTube as well.
I want to ask one more question, because I find it fascinating that Otangelo is admitting that God cannot create if the circumstances aren't right. That
Peter,
to me is fascinating.
I give you an example, Peter. Let's suppose you are an engineer and you have the purpose or the goal to make a car. And it needs to have certain functions.
Yeah, I get your example. No need to explain.
With God, it's
what
the
you're
same
saying,
thing.
if I'm an engineer, I can only do things with the materials that I have. And the same thing goes for God. He can only do things with materials that are there. So he didn't create the universe. He didn't create the materials. He didn't create the environment. He didn't create any of this. He just found stuff and started mixing them. That is your God. So your God is not the creator of everything. Your God is just a guy who walked into a factory and found the materials that he needed and created life. That is not the God that you've been proposing all this time, Otangelo. So for me, that's new. That's a step forward, because that means that your God is no longer omnipotent. Your God is no longer the creator of everything. Your God is just a guy who found materials and figured out a way to create life. That is a very, very limited God. It's also not the God of the Bible. So I'm curious, what kind of religion do you adhere to today?
I'm not proposing anything of what he just said, Peter. Of
You
course,
do.
I believe. Of course,
You
I
do.
believe in the. Can I answer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I believe, of course, in the God who created the universe, life, consciousness, everything physical that we observe around us, and not, as you are saying, that he is a God which just find matter and things and stuff on the planet Earth and then made life. That's not what I am saying. But my only argument, my only argument, which I presented in the beginning, is that life has to be fine-tuned. The fine-tuned
Berserker is pretty good. It wasn't my favorite anime.
That's all well and
Not
good,
the
but
worst.
JL
Pretty
just
good.
gave you
Give it like a
an
6.5,
example
6.5
of
out of
how
10.
life can form on another planet, and you completely dismissed that because now it's no longer possible.
Yeah,
Well,
that means,
actually,
and you said specifically to JL, everything has to be 100% perfectly right in order to create life on a different planet. That is the argument that I'm attacking right now.
And that comes down to actually an extension off of that, Otangelo. One thing I think that we can pretty much suss this out. So I need to ask you, are you saying, Otangelo, are you saying that life anywhere else under the random circumstances, under like just things coming together and happening, that life is impossible under those circumstances? Or are you just saying that it's extremely unlikely or highly improbable? It's possible, but highly improbable. Like the odds are stacked against it. Or are you saying that it is flat out 100% impossible?
I mean, this is a conversation which I had many times, JL. And of course, the question is, up to one point, is it reasonable to say that the odds, they are so astronomically huge that it is warranted or justified to say, well, we can put that chance in the realm of the impossible.
Well, no, I'm asking you. That's why I'm asking you. Are you saying that it is impossible, or are you saying that it is possible, but highly unlikely? Which one are you saying?
Well, in order to not put a dispute here, AL, I stick to the second option. It is extremely unlikely. It is not impossible, but extremely unlikely.
Good to go. Then let me. That's you. But that's intellectually honest. Because even though I don't think that you have the sufficient mathematical functions or the probability functions to actually determine that, but you recognize that it is not impossible. It's not 100%, bar none. Boom! It requires a God to exist. So that's good. That's important. And you side on the God side because you've somehow declared it to be so highly improbable that it require an intelligence to make it happen. We're just saying that there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of that intelligence. There's no evidence to conclude that there is, and that the best conclusion, given the evidence at hand and given what we see in the universe, is that this came about by random chance when the window that allows for life to take hold and start self-replicating and going, that window opened on this planet. And it will be open temporarily, cosmologically speaking, and will eventually close, and life will no longer be possible on this planet. So it literally opened up, life began, life will propagate, and then eventually, by virtue of our orbital mechanics, life will eventually die off, and this planet will not be possible on this planet anymore. This is just the natural state of things. This is how the universe works. We just happen to be able to live on this planet for a very short amount of time, and that could happen somewhere else. So
yeah, I would agree with you here, JL, in regards that I am too incredulous to believe that what you're proposing is a reasonable option to stick to.
Okay, and I can say that in response to that, that your incredulity is irrational because you haven't eliminated the possibility that it could occur by random circumstance, because you only have the sample size of one life as we know it here on this planet right now. So to be incredulous is just kind of like I said, that's irrational. Because we haven't eliminated the possibility that it could occur somewhere else. Now, if we were to somehow be able to scan the entire universe, all of it, and be like, well, life doesn't exist anywhere else, it's here, that would be a step in your direction. But we haven't been able to do that. We can't eliminate the possibility. So we can't say it's specifically one or the other. We can just say, this is the conclusion we have based on the evidence that we have at hand. And the evidence we have on hand is there's no evidence of an intelligence that came around and made the life magically, conjured it out of nothingness, or conjured it out of the earth or whatever. There's no evidence that an entity didn't come along and use natural process to do it as well. There's no evidence of this intelligence out there. So we can't say that it exists, but we can say that from all the evidence we have, these things did occur naturally. They do occur naturally, but the parameters have to be just right for them to occur. And that's it. Once we get more evidence, we can change that position. Like if we were to find evidence of your God or a God or any God or whatever. But until we do that, we can't conclude that it's a part of the conclusion. We can't say it's a part of the conclusion because we're being intellectually honest in that. And just saying, well, it's so virtually impossible that it must be this. That doesn't work. You understand where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, I think there is no evidence, JL, that no intelligence or no mechanism whatsoever instantiates the universe, life, and consciousness. And there is no evidence, in my understanding, that no intelligence is capable to instantiate molecular machines, blueprints, factories, computers, transistors, energy turbines. These things we know by our own experience that we are capable of to instantiate them through our intelligence. So we don't even need to test that hypothesis because we have already with us the example that intelligence is capable of doing it. So the inference that God, which is a much more intelligent and powerful being, can do all this is logical in my understanding, and it is not logical to conclude that no mechanism whatsoever can instantiate all these things.
Yes,
But
but that
you
only
you
that only
you
gets you to
agree that this God could only do this once, and it's highly unlikely that he's going to do it again somewhere in the universe on a different planet. That
Well,
is a
maybe
pretty
it is.
limited God. I
Well,
really
no,
think,
maybe it's
and I was
no.
intellectually honest
Maybe
well,
of you.
maybe
I
he
wasn't
can do it. I don't
Potential.
know.
well,
Can
actually,
I
this is
finish
interesting.
for once? I
Peter,
wasn't
this
Yes.
is
finished,
actually
Potential.
Peter,
Yeah,
this is
sure, go
actually
ahead.
this is actually
I'm sorry.
interesting because Otangelo, and I have to agree with him on this one, that you can appeal to deism to get a sufficiently powerful enough entity that kicked the football and everything and then pissed off with no evidence of its existence. You can reason yourself to that. So
Yeah.
I couldn't disagree with you on that. Yeah, we haven't eliminated the possibility that it was the sufficiently powerful enough entity. So you can get to deism on that, of course. But you say specifically it's the Christian God.
Yeah.
So how did you
The Christ-
eliminate the possibility that it's just deism alone? And what justifies your leap to the Christian God?
Yeah, I am
and the
not
Christian God would be able to create life on other planets. It would be easy for the Christian God, and you claimed that this is highly unlikely, and
No,
therefore
I
limiting,
no, you're straw manning
and
me again,
therefore
Peter. You're straw manning
limiting,
me again, Peter.
and therefore limiting your own God. These are your words. People can roll this back and listen to what you said. You
Yeah,
said it's
you're straw manning
highly
me.
unlikely. So your
Well,
God
go
could
ahead,
only do this
Otangelo.
once,
Hang on a second,
not
Peter.
again.
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
let me
Otangelo.
address both of you quick. JL, I agree with you that the teleological argument does not necessarily lead to the Christian God, while I actually believe that the Kalam leads to the God of the Bible, but that's another argument. And to Peter's objection, the God of the Bible could maybe intending to create life on another planet in another galaxy. Why not? And that's not what I claimed would not be possible. What I am saying is that in order to have life permitting planet, you need very specific parameters which also need to be fine tuned. And if you don't
Why,
want a
if
God
your
to
God
be,
exists and he can do anything he wants, why do we need that? He could just poof it into existence. We don't need anything. We don't even need a planet.
well, if we are talking about
You
physical
just
life,
argued against your own God. You just argued that your God can't create a planet. Your God can't create the building blocks of life. He needs all of that to be in place in order to create. You can't
straw
have
manning
your
me
cake
again,
and eat it too. Either your God can do anything he wants or he can't. If he
I've never
can't,
said that. I've never said that. You're
he's
straw
not
manning
the
me
God
again.
of the Bible.
You're straw manning me again, Peter.
No,
I've
I'm
never
not
said that God
strawmanning
can
you
do
again.
anything.
You said for the third time now, it could be possible, but we need a planet in which all the parameters are there, and all the parameters are just perfect for God to create life. Those were your words. Don't tell me that I'm strawmanning you. I'm actually steelmanning what you just said.
Oh, you didn't steal man me, Peter. Let me say that very clearly
I
again.
did.
In
So
order
God
to
can
have
create life anywhere in the universe. He doesn't need the building blocks of life.
Okay, just
That's
a
not
sec, folks.
true.
I just need to intervene for a moment. We've put a fair amount of time into this conversation, and there are a few people in the audience who are waiting. So perhaps we should try to keep this at maybe another 5 minutes or so. Would that be okay?
Up to you, Randolph. You are the guy here.
Fine with me.
Taco's the organizer, actually, but I'm just kind of suggesting we try to maybe keep the points a little bit more pithy, as some other people like to say, short and pithy.
Yeah, so just let me quick respond to Peter. Of course, God could create another planet in another galaxy in the universe, and which would be life permitting, but it also needs to have the parameters which are necessary to have life. What I said is that whatever physical life that we are talking about, it requires a planet which is finely tuned in order to be able to host life.
Well,
Why
ultimately, it
does
would have
it
been
have to have
fantastic.
the
It would have been
parameters?
fantastic. Ultimately, I think we can put this to bed, is that it would have been fantastic if that God, in all of its power and wisdom and knowledge and everything, had communicated this effectively when it was inspiring belief. That it would have explained all this instead of forcing human beings to appeal to magic for it to happen. Because that's where I was going with this. That's where I was essentially going with this, is that you got it to deism, which I don't have a problem with. But making the leap to the Christian God, that thing dies on the logical entailments.
Yeah,
Because,
I'm not going to claim that the teleological argument leads to the Christian God, JL.
well, I understand that, but but I mean, okay, so you agree that it could just be deism.
Yes.
So that's why I was asking you, how do you make the leap to the Christian God? Because the Christian God dies on the logical entailments of everything about it, basically all of its attributes, all of its nature, all of this, the evidence of the evidence of what the universe that we observe, as opposed to what this entity is. It dies on those entailments, and I'm curious as to how you make that leap. Okay, and what Peter was
Well,
talking about actually falls into that. It's like, what justifies you making that? Because even the Kalam only talks about a prime mover, like a first mover, an unchanged changer, which essentially could still be deism, because it doesn't make any claims as to like the omni properties of the Abrahamic God. Okay, they were just fitting it
Exactly.
around that, and fitting it around that because that's all they had to work with at the time. So I'm saying it still could technically be deism, but how do you make the leap to the Abrahamic God is my question, and I think that's something you need to
well,
look at for the future.
well, JL, that of course would be an entirely different conversation. But I'm quick to give you
Why aren't you having
parameter.
that
Can I finish,
conversation?
please?
Isn't that more important,
Peter,
Otangelo?
Peter,
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 let him finish.
Peter, let him finish, please.
Yeah.
So just because we are at the end of the stream, I'll give you some attributes, and if you find anything which would be logically inconsistent, JL, then you have a point. So the God of the Bible is omnipresent, omniscient, spirit in a league of his own, immortal and invisible, the creator, unchanging, sovereign, one yet he exists in three persons, loving, gracious and merciful, righteous, holy, just, forgiving, and compassionate. That's about, there are some other attributes, but if you find some kind of
I do.
illogical attribute here,
He's
then
not.
you have
He's
a
not.
point.
He's not invisible. He showed himself to Adam and Eve. He showed himself to Abraham. He showed himself to Satan. God's not invisible.
Didn't he get drunk in the Bible too?
Yes, and
That's
he
not an
wrestled,
material concept.
and he lost. So yeah, God's
Well,
not
Peter,
invisible
so if he is
according to
visible,
the Bible.
That's a Christian concept. That's not Old Testament, from my
so
understanding.
if he is visible, Peter, you don't believe him because you are a
That's not what I said.
mesotheist, or are
Well,
you
no,
just
actually, and no,
That's
atheist?
not
sorry,
what I
guys.
said.
Guys,
I just
so
corrected you.
the
I
the,
just
the big one
corrected
on
you.
that, the big one on that, Otangelo, is that you claim that God is essentially omnibenevolent, that He is all loving, and I didn't hear you say morally perfect in there, which would have been more problematic. But if you think that God is omnibenevolent, then the problem of evil is logically
I
inconsistent with
didn't
that.
say omnibenevolent. I
So,
just said God is loving.
so are we going to
John
move on to the
3:16,
next speaker?
John
Yeah. Let's
4,
go and
okay.
do that. But there are a lot. I mean, there are lots of logical issues with the things you brought up, and it's all the classic stuff that you're already well aware of, Otangelo. So, but I agree with TJump that I think we need to move on to the next person because we've been on it for a minute.
But Tangelo, we do appreciate you coming up. I'm going to go ahead and move you back to the audience. Feel free to come up at the tail end, though. I did invite Twitty up. Twitty's having issues raising his hand, so
But
hopefully you can hear me there.
Taco,
What's
can
up?
I make one last remark? Next
Oh, yeah,
time
sure.
Otangelo comes up, I would suggest that he starts out with the evidence for a creator God first, and then we can go from there and see whether or not he created anything. Because we're rehashing the same thing with Otangelo over and over and over again. I think it's a waste of time.
Twitty is not accepting, so I'll go ahead and invite up Mr. Ahmed, who's been waiting for a little while. He's begging to speak in DMs.
Hello, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you for joining us. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Welcome.
For inviting me.
Oh, sir. So you said you could convince us a God exists. You said a God specifically.
Yes.
Okay,
Go.
so what have you
Go
got
ahead,
for us?
I have some questions. Does science answer everything?
No.
Why do atheists care if people worship God?
Could you say that more clearly? What?
Why do atheists care if people worship God?
I can
Because
answer
they crash
that
planes
because
into
the
buildings.
worshiping of God entails other things, including the fact that people who worship God tend to force their belief on other people, tend to make legislation based on their belief. That is why we care. If you would just worship a God in the confinement of your own house, there's no atheist on the planet who'd have a problem with that.
They crash planes into buildings. That's why.
Can nothing create something?
No.
And no one says that.
How do you know that God doesn't exist?
That wasn't the question. The question is how do you know God does exist? Do you have any evidence? Because if there's no
Yeah.
evidence, it's probably just a figment of your imagination.
Okay.
And some of us.
Then tell me, what is the origin of life?
Okay,
Abiogenesis.
you're shifting over to us because what's happening is you're claiming with your God that there is the origin of life caused by your God. So the onus of justification or burden of proof actually belongs to you because you're the one who's making that claim. Myself, I'm not claiming that I know how the universe began. There are some ideas out there that are being discussed in scientific circles. But there's also I'm not siding with that, so I don't actually hold an opposite position, and it's possible that there could be multiple positions that are that contradict your position. So now it comes down to which one. But you are making a specific active claim that the universe started because of your God. So the onus is on you to demonstrate why that is the case.
I have another question.
Do you have any evidence?
Why instead of having questions, why not present, as TJump just said, present the evidence for your God, because that would get us to your God a lot faster than trying to find questions for which our answer would be we don't know, and we would be honest if we said we don't know.
Is your
Apparently,
God
you
immaterial?
do know. So tell us what you do know.
Sorry, I just
Instead
need
of
to
asking
clarify.
questions.
I just need to clarify, add to one thing Peter said. It's honest to say we don't know when we actually don't know.
Exactly.
Nobody knows. All we know is that life emerged somehow and then it began to flourish and propagate. Some scientists think they are getting close to an answer. Others say we may never figure out this problem.
Yeah.
Ideas abound though.
Hold on. So one model has
correct
evidence.
and reasonable.
Well, one model has evidence, one model doesn't. So abiogenesis has tons and tons of evidence. Intelligent design has zero evidence. So one is reasonable, one is unreasonable.
And that the soul actually exists, right? Do you think we were created or something? Is that what you're saying?
I just want to acknowledge one thing Mr. Ahmed said, and is that he's saying that we don't actually know. That's a reasonable approach to take. So carry on.
You are made from a sperm.
Okay.
But do you think that something that isn't natural created us?
Yes.
Can you show that some category besides natural exists?
And are you aware
Some
that
have
there are forms of life that are not created by a sperm? And also, we are not created by a sperm. Just wanted
let
to
me
put that
let
out
me
there
let
because
me finish it.
we
Let me.
definitely, most
Peter, come
definitely
on,
are
bud.
not.
Let him answer, bud. Go ahead, Ahmed.
Some have suggested that life emerged, for example, sun. Others suggest that the mystery may have an answer rooted in thermodynamics. But if an answer does come around, I will believe it, accept it with evidence. That is, when I see it. In the meantime, God did it is an empty statement full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
A little butchered Shakespeare there, but so do you think that God did it? That
Do you
Yes,
apply the exact same rules to your God? So no one knows if your God did it, and we will wait until the evidence comes around to even consider that a God did it. That is the difference between us and you. You have special pleading for a God. You won't accept anything else if there's no evidence for it. But your God, you're going to accept him without any evidence. Why
let
is
me
that?
tell you something. Do you
No, no.
live
Answer
according to
answer
history?
my question, please. Why is it that you don't apply the exact same set of rules to your God? Why are you using special pleading to shoehorn him in?
Because I'm telling you that God created us all. This is just proved
That's
by many
just
scientists.
restating the claim. That's just restating the claim. My question
This is
is, you were very specific when it comes to science. If there's no evidence, you see no reason to believe it. For God, there's no evidence, yet you do see reason to believe it. Why are you using special pleading for God? Why does God not have to follow the exact same rules everything else has to, in your opinion?
the problem with this question is that it presupposes a belief in an invincible thing that will out of me at
Not
my death.
I
There
made
is
I made no claims about an invincible thing. I just said you need evidence for everything except
yes,
for a God. And you still don't answer my question why you do not need evidence for a God in order to accept that he exists. Why are you
because
using
because
special pleading just for your God?
because we are smart enough to understand.
But
I'm
How,
sorry.
wait,
Can
because
you
the
say
only
that
thing,
how,
again? I didn't catch that. I didn't catch that.
I told you we are smart enough to understand that God exists. You are dumb enough.
No, no,
well,
no. I'm not smart enough to understand that God exists because there's no reason to conclude that God exists because there's
so
no evidence for a God ever existing. And
Ahmed, so
you
he's
came up here saying that you had evidence for God, while the only thing is that you're now claiming is that God exists and there's no need for any evidence that he does,
so
which is the
Ahmed.
Yes,
question that I'm addressing.
What he was saying was were special pleading to your God, and then rather than trying to justify that, you just go and say it's self-evident, right? Is that what you're saying now? That it's
yeah,
self-evident? Well,
yes.
how is it self-evident when the only thing that appears to exist is the natural?
It is natural because atheists don't believe in gods, which means we don't believe in the supernatural trappings.
no, some atheists do believe in the supernatural, but so how is you saying God created the universe any different from me saying a magical farting leprechaun potato created the universe? Like, what is the evidence that shows that you're true and the farting potato leprechaun isn't?
I think that covers it. I have no doubt that some will accuse me of engaging in scientism. Should that happen, I will refer that.
What? So the question was, is what is the evidential difference between God and a magical farting potato leprechaun?
You don't simply understand, and I have made my point clear. and I will definitely get back to you after some time.
Okay, once you can answer that one, let me know.
I noticed something strange. Did you guys notice that some of the points that he appeared to be trying to make were like the opposite point, like he was reading from a debate script that he was reading the wrong side of it or something?
Yes.
Like the last thing he just said, he literally just said, some will accuse me of scientism. Like,
Yeah, and his
Yeah,
Shakespeare
I noticed
quote,
that.
his
I
quote
noticed
was,
that he.
was saying that God doesn't exist, that the claim that God created everything is empty.
Yeah, I noticed that he was not really answering questions. He just kind of moved on to the next question he had, and TJump and Peter both asked, "Well, do you have an explanation for this?" at one point, and he just kind of bulldozed onward to the next questions. So he
All
just
he
wants to
did-
ask questions.
All he did was shift the burden of proof. If you can't prove that God doesn't exist, then I win. That's not the case.
but just specifically, the last thing that came out of his mouth, it sounded like he read the wrong half of a debate script. He literally just said, "Some will accuse me of scientism," right? Like, anyway, so I suspect that was trolling. I could be wrong, or just that he was reading from a script. I could be.
No,
mistaken.
I don't think he was trolling. I think he was sincere, but I also think that he hasn't had conversations like this before because he's still in the mindset that everyone believes a God exists, and there are only a few atheists who start doubting and then come up with other options. I think he was sincere, but he just
We can move on to
maybe
the
knew
next
it.
speaker. It'll be fine.
Yeah, maybe he just
I think
misspoke at the end. But
I agree with
the
you,
last
So
last thing
Yeah.
you said made no sense, and then he just like exited, like he was embarrassed or something.
Angst has been in queue, so I'm gonna pull up Angst right now. Hello, Angst.
Hello.
So, what's going on? Can you
Can you
convince us
hear me?
God, or we can? Can you convince us
Okay.
God exists, or what? How can we help you out today?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask TJump a few clarifying questions about his position before I get into that, if that's okay.
Okay, hurry.
All right. So, let me see. So you said that like you advocate for the best of all possible worlds, but if you have the best of all possible worlds, you still need some sort of normative claim. And I was watching a video of yours where you said, "No, I don't need a normative claim. I'm making a descriptive claim." But then we're not talking about morality anymore.
I've already covered this like many times. Normative doesn't necessarily refer to ought claims, and so if you mean by ought claim, no, you don't need an ought claim.
Right. So you're getting rid of the oughts.
Yep.
You're just saying morality is a
my
description.
morality is literally not the only one that does that. You can see others at Moral Naturalism on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. If you're just ignorant on that, that's your problem.
Well, I don't care about what other people have to say. I'm focused on your position. So you're getting rid of the oughts. You're not talking about morality here then.
No,
You're talking about
you're an
descriptions
idiot.
of the
There
universe.
are lots of different versions of morality that do that. That was the point I literally just addressed. There are many versions of morality that do that. If you think that's not talking about morality, you're just an idiot. So go check out
Okay,
the
that's
other
fine.
models of morality that talk about that, like moral naturalism.
That's fine. And you still hold that any imposition on will that's immoral, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the passage of time is immoral. You still hold
Yep.
that.
If you don't want to passage
Okay,
of time,
that's
if
fine.
you don't want to age, if you don't want to get hit by a rock, those are all immoral.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's consistent. So I was gonna ask you, TJump, do you accept the principle of sufficient reason?
No.
No? Okay. Can you motivate the view that contingent entities exist?
Fuck. It's not even a coherent sentence. It just needs to be possible that a brute fact exists. If it's possible a brute fact exists, then the PSR is false.
Okay. Yeah, I'm asking if you can motivate the belief that
I don't
that
know
you
what the
hold
fuck you're even talking
around
about.
that. So you do have a belief,
Motivate
right?
the belief.
That you have a
Like if I
belief
shock you in the
that
brain
brute
enough,
facts
probably.
exist, right? Do you have a belief that brute facts exist?
No, I have a belief that brute facts are possible.
That they're possible. Okay. What justifies that belief?
There's no logical contradiction in brute fact. Pwned.
No, I'm asking what theory of epistemic justification do you appeal to?
What? There's no logical contradiction in the existence of a brute fact.
Do you understand what I'm asking you?
No, because you're an idiot. So
Okay, do you
if it's
think
logically
rational principles?
possible, if it's logically possible for a brute fact to exist, then there's no logical contradiction, and that is an epistemically justified belief. Therefore, the PSR is false. It's not
Okay,
particularly
TJump,
hard.
you're making an inference based on your belief. I'm wanting to know, is the relation between that inference and the belief propositional or non-propositional?
Okay, well, if you ask that in a coherent way, then maybe I'll answer it.
Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's incoherent. I'm
No,
asking you a very
it's
clear question.
incoherent because you're using a bunch of technical language that means absolutely nothing. So if you're if you're not intelligent enough to be able to simplify that, then that's your problem. I'm not even going to waste my time with you.
So it would be angst. Sorry, it would be propositional if TJump was phrasing it as a proposition. So I guess it doesn't qualify as propositional.
Well, I just want to know if that's what TJump holds. If that's what he believes.
He was pretty clear. He indicated there's no logical contradiction, so he's not objecting to the possibility of brute facts existing, if I understand him correctly.
Okay, so TJump, is there some sort of awareness condition that allows you to know the process by which
Gibberish.
your beliefs are
Get rid of all the
justified?
technical language. I'm just going to shut you up.
You don't understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Just
I
to
just
clarify.
think you're just
I
an
can
idiot.
simplify it. Well, I can simplify it for you. I just want
Okay,
to
go ahead
make
and
it clear
simplify it
on the
then.
record. Yeah, but I'm just trying to make it
Okay,
clear on the record. You
kick him
don't
out. Get rid
understand
of
what
him.
I'm saying.
Get rid of him. Get rid of him.
You don't know what I'm saying?
Bye bye. Bye bye.
You do this for
Can
a
you
living.
simplify
Bye-bye.
it, Angst?
If you can
or no?
simplify it, just simplify
Yeah,
it. Great.
yeah,
You've got,
I
you've got a
can.
bigger
Yeah.
vocabulary. Just simplify it.
I just want him to clarify that he doesn't understand what I'm
No, I
saying.
do
You
understand.
won the
You're
gold
an idiot.
star of the day. You've got a big
Wait,
vocabulary.
you do understand,
Now
No,
so
I
why
do
can't you
understand.
just...
You
Wait,
don't
he
We're
said-
not
understand.
arguing about
Bye-bye, dumb
that.
kid.
Just simplify moving forwards. A global warming skeptic is on a short time frame, and he was in queue earlier. I'm going to pull him back up. He actually pulled out, but he went back up in queue now, so I'm inviting you up.
So what you're
What's going
saying
on?
is with global warming, we don't have a lot of time.
Exactly. Just like global warming.
Hello, global warming skeptic. How are you?
Hello.
What you got for us today?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I just kind of wanting, because there is a little bit of a way you could turn this on its head, because like you can prove God's existence simply by disproving the existence of naturalism. At
No.
least,
Like there could be
yeah,
a
that's one way you could do it. So I'd kind of like to start with that. Like,
so just to clarify, there can be a supernatural without a god. So even if you disproved naturalism, that wouldn't be evidence of a god. It'd just be evidence of the supernatural.
well, are you going to assume that the supernatural exists for the case of argument? Because I mean, we can do that.
Well, there's many atheists who do believe in the supernatural. Supernatural doesn't mean God. So simply disproving naturalism wouldn't be evidence of God.
The dichotomy isn't naturalism or God. The dichotomy is naturalism or not naturalism in that case. And so that wouldn't prove your God.
Well,
but if you can
That
disprove
and
naturalism, that's great. That's
naturalism-
evidence. Go for it.
That and naturalism and God are not mutually exclusive concepts, because the naturalistic way that we observe the universe could be the very mechanism by which God operates. So they're not mutually exclusive.
yeah, well, they're not quite mutually exclusive. I would say it's close, but we can kind of get to that point. But I'm kind of curious though, and I'm not trying to flip the burden on you guys or anything. I'm just a little bit curious of, like, if the supernatural is not God, then what form would the supernatural take that could drive nature into existence?
Karma, dharma, ki, feng shui, yin and
Brahma.
yang. There are lots of different forces that are non-gods, which just are in different religions that could permeate the universe. And those are only some of the infinitely many ways the supernatural could be that don't entail a god.
The Force.
The force.
Yeah, but from what I understand about like things like Buddhism and stuff, like these things already presuppose existence, right? So yin yang is like referring to energy that already
presuppose
exists.
existence. Like God also presupposes existence. Do you think God doesn't exist?
That's kind of true. But like energy is a part of nature though, and that's kind of the big problem, I guess, with this is like with Buddhism, I guess there could be like a supernatural type of energy, but yeah, I guess there could be a driver that is like some supernatural non-physical form of energy that doesn't abide by any like natural laws, I guess. But like, if we're gonna presuppose that the supernatural exists, because that's, I guess, where we're going with this. Like, how can you explain and how can you explain a universe or any verse with a very specific level of entropy that we have that allows for clumps of matter and an increasing amount of complex information, i.e., things that could be arranged in a certain way to describe something?
Can be
Right? You guys
determined.
understand thermodynamics, right?
It can be determined by other laws of physics.
Yeah, but one of those laws is like the second law of thermodynamics that says that information actually decreases.
Can be determined by other laws. So that law is fixed because of other laws.
Okay, I'm not talking about the existence of the law. I'm talking about the prevalence of the law, right?
That's what I'm saying. The reason that law is the way it is because a different law determines it to be that way.
What I don't understand what you're saying here. Like what law determines the second? It is a law in itself, right?
Right. Not all laws are equivalent. Some laws, like space and time, are emergent from other laws that exist before space and time. So entropy is an emergent property of other laws that are more fundamental in quantum mechanics.
I'm still, but I mean, we have the law. Like here's the thing: is like when we're talking about a universe that forms without a deliberate driver, right? And Penrose has gone into this, and there's other people that have gone into things from the probability of life to the probability of a universe.
I have no idea what you're saying right now. A driver, like all universes have to come into existence from a driver. None of them come in from nothing. They don't pop into existence from nothing.
Well, okay, but if the driver is not sentient, then it would almost have to be random, right?
No, it can be determined.
Like there's no, like, how could it not be seemingly random?
Because it could be determined. So like if there's a quantum field that can only produce one kind of universe, then every kind of universe that it produces will be the exactly the same kind. Won't be random.
Yeah, I don't, like, we're talking on two different hang on. Okay, how about this? How about, like, explain to me, like, I'm not saying, again, I'm not trying to shift the burden of proof on you, but, you know, just to kind of get a better idea of your thought process, could you explain to me, like, what your best either tradition or quantum theory is as to how the universe possibly came into existence, or how nature came into existence?
Casimir effect, but they're all, it's the Casimir effect, but they're all better than a god. Literally any quantum theory you make up that's based in math and physics is better than a god. So
it's also shifting the burden of proof. Why not start with
I'm not,
and come up with the evidence for your explanation? Global warming.
Well, it only be shifting the burden of the proof if he said that if you didn't get it right, then mine's right. But so I don't know why he brought it up. So Casimir effect. Casimir effect is my answer. What's the point?
That's a little bit too simplistic, I guess. Like I don't think the Casimir effect, I think,
is the Casimir effect a better explanation than a god because it's something we can demonstrate exists? Yes.
Well, the Casimir effect requires that there be empty space, right? Because that's what.
No.
It
requires quantum fields.
Casimir effect. If I understand the Casimir effect right.
No, it requires quantum fields. Quantum fields exist. Quantum fields are the fundamental thing. That's better than a god. So my explanation is better than a god.
Yeah, but quantum fields require empty space.
No, empty space is a result of quantum fields. Quantum fields exist before and outside of empty space.
They really don't. Quantum fields
They-
do require
no.
space.
Literally, space is an emergent feature. It is not the most fundamental thing in the universe.
Like the quantum foam though exists. Like it creates space from within. It expands space. I should say.
No. Space
You can't
itself is
expand-
literally emergent. Google emergent space time. Emergent space time. Space is not fundamental. It's not the most fundamental thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a little bit too simplistic. But the point is that without a deliberate driver, you can't get a
Deliberate
universe.
drivers can be deterministic forces. Deterministic forces can be the driver. You don't need a conscious agent ever for anything.
Well, again, you're not going to get a universe with a low level of entropy.
Yes,
right?
you will. If the deterministic driver is a force that determines that, then that's exactly what you're going to get, and the only thing you're going to get.
Okay, but what's the probability of that?
If it's deterministic, the probability is 1 because it's determined.
Okay, but there could be an infinite number.
And there
of
could be an
other,
infinite number
like,
of types of
configurations.
gods too. That doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, but we're arguing that any god exists, right?
Global,
like
it's
you can
also
call a god what you want.
global. It's also an issue because you only have a sample size of 1 to operate from. You have one universe here. So
Yeah,
there are
but
no
we have
other examples of universes. I mean, we can hypothesize other possibilities, but we only have a sample size of 1. So obviously, it's 100% because it happened.
yeah. Well, obviously, reality exists, but we're talking about how do we explain the specific reality that we see.
That's what
And the
TJump
thing
just
is,
did.
again, I can pull up Roger Penrose's probability of like a universe with life popping up, like, you know, without it being deliberate. Like
Roger
the
Penrose
number
is
of
an atheist. He doesn't do that.
configurations-
He doesn't say that. So no, what you can do is you can say, given the probability of the laws of physics we know about and the variations we know about, and that's it. But guess what? If there's some determining force we don't know about and it causes everything to be exactly as it is and it can't be differently, then the probability is exactly 1. Exactly 1. There's no difference. And so if there's a force that we don't know about that causes everything to be exactly the way it is, then guess what? Probability is 1. And if there's a God that determines everything to be exactly as it is, the probability is 1. But either way, it can be done without a God. You just need a force. If there's a force that determines it, that problem solved.
Well, the problem is that scientists have found that there are numerous configurations of the
No.
universe
They
that
found
were
that
possible.
we don't know of a determining force that makes it be the way it is. That's all they found. They haven't found that it can be different ways. They found that we don't know of anything that determines it yet. But if that applies to a God too. So we don't have any reason to think there's a God that determines it, just like we don't have any reason to think there's a force that determines it. Both of them are possible.
Well, I'm not talking about what I'm talking about the number of possible configurations, whatever determining. I
The
don't
number
care.
of possible configurations is the amount that is possible given whatever determines it. So if there is a law that determines it to be exactly the way it is, there are no other possibilities. It cannot be different. It must exactly be this way with no possible variation. So if there is a law that forces all the laws to be exactly as they are right now, they can't be different.
Okay, but that's not what the scientists are saying.
We haven't discovered it. There's no God. We've never discovered God. We've never discovered this determining force. Both of those things are undiscovered. Both of them are possible. Both of them explain the data.
Okay, well, I can post a link right now, or I can find it in a second.
Just tell me what the link
number
says.
of configurations
No,
that are
oh my
possible.
God, I've literally answered this. The number of configurations is based on whatever caused it to exist, whatever designed it, determined it, whatever. If there is a law we have not discovered yet, that means they can't be different. So what we think can be different now, we could be wrong, and they can't be different. So if God designed it in one way and it could only be that one way, or if a law forced it to be that one way, those both explain the fine tuning.
Okay, so what we have is, right, a lack of knowledge. So we can use an inductive probability in this case, right? So we have something we don't know about. We don't know if it's God, or we don't know if there's this other energy or whatever voodoo, I guess you want to call it.
A
So
law of physics, that's what I call it.
if you apply the inductive probability to the case, you can either have a sentient thing that put things in the exact way where there would be life, where there would be Bibles talking about this entity, or this random law that you're talking about that we have no idea that even could exist.
It definitely could exist. Like all of that's the
and-
consensus in physics. So
right,
the consensus
so
in physics.
I would say as an inductive case, like your probability is next to nothing given the amount of human knowledge.
So you've got it backwards. The probability that there is a mind that is outside of the laws of physics is next to nothing. That's why literally no one in physics thinks that's the case. And the consensus in physics is that there are more laws that are more fundamental than the ones we've discovered, which is every single model of physics. So given induction and all of the evidence we have of every field of physics, the law model is the better one and the God model is the worse one.
I think in this case, I would go with over half of the planet observing God over like just pretending that something exists.
Global warming.
And I think I'll
just
just end it there.
It's an argument for popularity, just because people look for the easiest explanation. Oh, he left. Oh, that's a shame.
It's also a little bit tricky that half of the planet believes in different gods. And if you really boil it down to the basic things, literally every believer believes in a different god. So I don't think it's a good argument.
So once again, an argument from incredulity.
Yeah.
And we're going to point out that if you have chirping smoke detectors like that, it means you probably should change the batteries to save your life.
I would vote for smashing it with a baseball bat.
Yeah. Some people in our YouTube audience are noticing the chirping sound.
So intentionally, Blank is actually second in queue, but I'm going to pull him up because Twitty is like let him go up in place of me, so I'm pulling him up right now.
Right. Hello.
How's it going?
Oh, welcome.
Pretty good. So I just want to sit there and create some backgrounds for the argument about to come through. I guess I could be closely related to like a deist. And in TJump, so from what I got from your worldview, do you believe in determinism?
So in the case of free will, yes, there's no such thing as free will. In the case of physics, there is indeterministic random forces.
Right. So okay, all right. So that's going to make this a little bit harder for me. But anyways, so I mean, and just a little bit of outline too. In nature, in humans, in everything, you kind of see this top-down order to everything. Can we all agree on that?
I don't know what you mean by that.
So I mean, let's just look at the animal kingdom as an example. In all throughout, like all animals we've observed, you see like you have a very clear hierarchy. You usually have an alpha male running let's just say with lions, running a tribe of lions, right?
Sure.
And then
not in
you see
bacteria, though. Not in all of nature. Not in
okay,
plants.
but
It's funny you should mention lions, because in lions the male is not running the tribe; it's the female. But carry on.
Lion brides are matriarchal.
But I mean,
that's
so
beside the point.
My point being, you see this top-down order to it, and then you see the same exact things in human beings. Everything has this. It ends up becoming this almost strict, orderly way it's organized. Can we agree on that?
Only in like biological animals. Like bacteria don't have that. Rocks don't have that. Oceans don't have that. Fish don't have that.
So let me specify it a little more. Animals with a complex ability to think, like a complex functional brain.
Well, jaguars don't have that. So even like
You
animals
only
that
see it in
aren't
social animals. That would narrow it down, I think.
Yes, social animals usually social mammals.
Animals, right?
Social mammals.
Well, I mean, you say jaguars don't have that. I mean, but jaguars they still have like they might be kind of I guess you could say an introverted sort of animal. They're on their own and everything, but they still have like their territory. They mark their territory. They are territorial. They don't.
What's the point? What's the point
of
the hierarchy thingy that you're trying to say?
So then now let's apply that to a more universal scale, right? In the universe, can we all agree that there are universal truths and absolutes that govern like the existence of our universe, say like physical laws, like you were saying before.
Sure, but none of them are the hierarchy thingy. That's not one of them.
Well, I'm just saying it like as the order part of it, you know, like that's my point. The order in organization, right?
Yes, the universe has order to it. It's not completely random. Okay.
Yes. So I mean, and let's just I'm just gonna point out mathematics specifically. So I mean, and I don't want to get this into like a crazy thought experiment right here. I just want a simple yes or no. Do you believe mathematics was discovered or created?
It was invented by humans. It's a language to describe reality.
Okay, but so I'm not like, so you think it was 100% invented. You do not think that mathematics are universal laws.
Mathematics is a language to describe the way the universe operates. The way the universe operates is like a law, but the math isn't. The math is just describing that.
So you don't think that like I understand like so it doesn't matter the language you put to it. Like no matter where you go, like mathematical laws are going to be constant, right?
No, math is a thing we make up. So we can make up mathematical language that doesn't describe reality. Like if I say F equals MA times 37, that does not describe reality. F equals MA describes reality. So some combinations of math describe the way reality is, and some combinations of math don't describe the way reality is, and some are self-contradictory. Like if I say 1 + 1 = 7. So math is like English. If I say the sky is blue, that describes reality. Doesn't mean it follows the law of English.
Right. So then like saying 1 + 1 = 7, you're disobeying like what we know as mathematical laws.
Right. That's no, I'm disobeying the laws of the language. So if I said there is a round square, that is also disobeying the laws of language. So it's just a language.
Right. And I want to, and I'm trying to what I'm trying to do is differentiate here. I'm not saying like the laws of language. I understand that like language and how we define things and how we define things and the words we put to things, like that's a social construct. Right?
Math is the same.
That.
Math is the exact same. Math is a formal language. If you just Google, like in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, math and logic are formal languages.
So so then the laws that describe that mathematics is used to describe, you think those are just not universal laws.
No, like if I say a round square is not a thing, that language can describe reality. So reality is a thing. And so if I describe reality with a language, the description is correct. So the mathematical law, like gravity, E = mc², those are accurate, but math, it's not a law of math. It's a law of reality that we describe with the language of math.
Right. And that's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, I know it doesn't sound like it, but like we like you might sit there like yes, I mean mathematics is a language, but I mean we have known and we have observed that this language we're putting to reality are constants and absolutes, like you just said.
No, most of them aren't. But what about it? So there's a pattern in reality. Yes, pattern in reality. What about it?
So yeah, it's pattern, it's ordered, it's very structured, right?
Yes, it's not absolutely random. So what?
How can you sit there and explain like how ordered and structured it is without coming from a view of creationism?
God would also have to be ordered and constructed. Anything the way the reality could be would have to be ordered and like constructed. So like if God has a nature to it, is God himself? Yes. Is there one God? Sure. So God would equally be as ordered as reality. And so if your argument is oh, you can describe the object with numbers, well then you can describe God with numbers, and that would be equally as God must have been created by a different God or something. So the fact that that reality can be described by numbers isn't evidence of God.
But so you sit there and say like I'm like that, and that's just one example. I'm talking about like everything, like universal laws in everything, physical laws we have observed, all of it, all of it's extremely ordered. We all know it's extremely ordered, right? Again. How and then you sit there and say like, oh,
would have to also be extremely ordered. So if you're going to say that anything that's extremely ordered must require a God, God must have been ordered by something.
So right. And do you believe do you believe physical and metaphysical laws are equivalent?
I don't know what a metaphysical law is.
Like philosophy. Do you think the physical and the metaphysical, like, do you think they follow the same rules?
What logic?
So do you understand that God can exist as a metaphysical concept?
It doesn't make any sense. So metaphysics is just like what's the fundamental nature of reality, which could just be physics. So metaphysics doesn't mean not physics. It just means the fundamental nature of reality.
What?
Metaphysics is the fundamental first principles of reality. That's what metaphysics means. So if physics is the fundamental first principles, then that is metaphysics.
That is not true.
Literally, it is. It's literally the definition on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Metaphysics is the fundamental first principles of reality.
Abstract theory with no basis in reality.
That's like the Google definition.
The branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space.
Yes, the first principles of things. So, like the space-time thing, those are wrong. We know those aren't fundamental now.
Okay, right.
So it's the fundamental first principles of reality, like I said.
So can you tell me what those fundamental first theories of reality are?
No, I can guess, but like no one knows what they are.
So it's all conjecture essentially, right?
Yes.
Well, no. Can you conclude that it is this entity that you speak of that you call God? I mean, can you with any intellectual honesty, can you say that it absolutely is this? Or wouldn't you also be in the position that you also don't know? You're just assuming that it is.
I'm not going to say it's assumption. I come from the view. I'm not saying like true. Like it's because again, like God is a metaphysical concept. It is something that cannot be empirically proven.
That's not what metaphysics means. So like, why do you think God is a better hypothesis than quantum field?
Because if you look at the order of the universe and everything, and you look at like the order and the structure of the world we live in, and what about it? It's all created. The structure and the world we live in, huh?
So in physics, quantum fields explain everything we see perfectly, and there's evidence that they exist. There's no evidence of a God. Why do you think when you look at them and you feel created, how is that evidence?
How do quantum fields prove existence in and of itself?
What? That doesn't even. So God must also exist. God couldn't prove existence in and of itself.
I'm just like how does like I'm not very well. That's a legitimate question. How does quantum physics prove existence in and of itself?
It doesn't make any sense. You can't prove existence in and of itself. That doesn't make sense. So anything that exists must exist. If God existed, he must also exist. You can't prove existence in and of itself. It's not a property like that. Existence is not a predicate. Incoherent question.
Quote Aaron Ra here. Truth is what the facts are.
Right. And the facts point to like everything is completely ordered. So let me go back to like looking at just look at
so why do you think order indicates God? Because order can indicate quantum field. You doesn't need a God to explain order.
Well, what about the because there is random chance in quantum mechanics. Am I wrong?
Sure.
Because like the Pauli exclusion principle, you cannot.
Yes, there is some randomness. So what?
So how are you using a quantum mechanic concept to prove orderliness when it's proven that there is random chance in there?
Randomness doesn't mean literally everything is random. So like uranium decay randomly, it decays randomly. That doesn't mean uranium is random. Like all of the particles, uranium still has a particular number of protons, particular number of electrons, particular number of neutrons.
Yes,
it's not random.
Yes.
The fact that there are some random things does not mean everything is random. So the fact that quantum mechanics can have some random features does not mean it doesn't also have ordered features. It also has very ordered features. That's why the equations work so well.
Right.
So quantum fields have order. They order things.
So again, if how does it explain the orderliness of like everything?
They're deterministic. So if the quantum fields have these particular properties, they will create a universe exactly like we see it.
So what's the driving force behind it?
It's nature. It has a particular nature which causes it to do these things that we see.
So what is the proof behind it being just nature? What's the difference between you saying the driving force is simply nature and me saying the driving force is a God?
Quantum fields have a basis in reality. They make novel testable predictions. They've been confirmed with empirical tests. Right.
I'm not denying the quantum fields part. I'm saying you're simply saying nature driving force behind it. That's
Yes.
it. What's the difference between you saying nature and me saying God?
We have evidence these
Evidence.
things exist and do stuff. We have no evidence of your thing that does anything.
It's evidence. Is that what TJump did? That
So,
there's
but
two-
you
there's-
you just
blank,
you just
blank,
said
blank. There's two
Yes.
systems. There's two systems. One that you're proposing God for. One that TJump is proposing nature for. There's
Yeah.
evidence to support TJump's conclusion, or the conclusion, the prevailing hypothesis that we currently rest on. There's none to support the existence of this metaphysical entity that you're proposing. So it's the intellectually honest position.
So, but I mean, I still don't understand with it. So you want to sit there and say like it's intellectually honest position, right? It's oriented more towards truth and everything.
What
Which
don't
I
you
mean,
understand?
again,
You said
right. So the driving force, like where is the driving force? And like you were talking with the previous guy about how like, and I'm not denying the existence of what you guys are saying. Like I mean, sure, like quantum fields could be and might be the explain the existence of our universe, and might be like the explain like determinism and stuff. But you said like there are like more fundamental laws that we simply do not know and have not discovered, right? And
could be.
yeah, there could be. Okay, there could be. So what is the driving force behind those laws? And
Like,
again, your answer
so-
answer is going to be the same exact thing. Nature. So
Yes,
what
nature.
what is the difference between you using an abstract concept such as
Well,
nature,
it's
and you're
not-
just going to
it's
say,
not an
well, it's
abstract
all quantifiable. Well, in this sense, like you can't simply say like you can't simply say, oh,
So,
well,
okay,
I'm
let
just
me
gonna
let me
sit there
try
and
let me
look
try to
at it in
explain. So, like,
natural-
if
okay.
we see a hoof print in the snow, imagine we're like walking in snow. I'm in Minnesota, so there's snow here all the time. We see a hoof print,
Right.
and you say it's a
Mhm.
unicorn. I say no, it's probably a horse. The difference between those claims is that one has a basis in reality. It's a combinations of principles and particles and laws that have been verified to not be a part of our imagination. So if you have a theory that is a combinations of principles, particles, and laws that have been shown to not be a part of your imagination, that theory is better than one that has any kind of parts or principles that have not been shown to not be a part of your imagination. So if we want
Right.
to say what is the fundamental nature of reality, what is the fundamental driving force behind everything, and right now the most fundamental thing we can possibly verify is quantum fields, that's the best explanation. Anything else we add on after that is just making shit up. So the best, most rational explanation is quantum fields are the most fundamental thing, and there is nothing more fundamental than them. And if you add anything after that, you're making shit up and it's less rational.
Okay. Still like so you don't think do you think there's a further explanation that's more fundamental than quantum fields?
There could be. I don't think there's any reason to believe that yet. And so the rational conclusion is that quantum fields are the most fundamental thing, full stop.
And so therefore you completely discredit any other worldview, because not worldview, I shouldn't say, any other sort of like creationist
Hypothesis.
Viewpoint.
Yes, because they have no
Or
evidence.
hypothesis.
So quantum fields have evidence. Everything else doesn't have evidence. Quantum fields are the best one because they have the evidence.
So you believe physical evidence reigns is the only true way
No.
to signify something that's true.
Evidence is the only way to signify something is true. Evidence is anything that can differentiate imagination from reality. So it doesn't need to be physical evidence. Physical evidence is just the best kind we found so far. So if you have a different kind of evidence, that's great, but there isn't any. All of the evidence indicates quantum fields.
So can you empirically and without any reasonable doubt prove to me the existence of an equilateral triangle?
What? You can't prove anything with 100% certainty. I'm not sure what you mean here.
So we know equilateral triangles exist, right?
They don't exist. They're imaginary, abstract.
Oh, it's an abstract concept.
Yes, they don't exist.
That
So,
goes back
but-
to the language that we use to describe something that has
Yep.
three angles, a shape that has three angles that are equal. That's pretty
Yeah.
much all it is. That goes back to that language that TJump was talking about beforehand.
Right,
It's
right.
descriptive, not prescriptive.
Okay. Right. But so you well, my point being is like we sit there and we can think in abstract, Like
Yes.
we can think in abstract.
Yes.
What you in like thinking of the driving force behind, say, like quantum fields, that's abstract, right?
No, that's empirical.
How is that not abstract?
And quantum fields are empirical. They've made novel testable predictions that we can empirically verify.
What causes quantum fields?
No, the quantum fields are the most fundamental thing. Nothing causes them. They are uncaused. But the quantum fields can be empirically verified.
What is the proof that the quantum fields are the most fundamental thing?
No, that's the most evidence we have, is that they are the most fundamental thing. We have no evidence of anything more fundamental. They create everything else. They create space and time. They create everything.
Right.
So if you go
So
beyond that, so there's evidence of quantum fields. There's no evidence for anything before quantum fields. So saying quantum fields are the most fundamental thing is the most rational supported position. Saying anything else is more fundamental is making shit up.
But you just agreed with me that physical evidence does not reign supreme for.
It's not the only kind of evidence. Yes,
truth.
there are other kinds of evidence, none of which indicates that quantum fields are made by something else.
I can't remember what the, hold on, let me look this up real quick because I can't exactly remember the term for it. But it's the laws of causality, right? Cause and effect. Everything has a cause, right? So where's the cause?
The quantum fields are the cause. They are necessary uncaused things.
Where's the cause for that?
They're uncaused. They don't have a cause.
So you don't believe in the laws of causality?
I do. Well, there's no such thing as the laws of causality. Causality is a term we use to describe actual laws. But so in the theist model, they say God is the ultimate cause and God is uncaused. They don't say literally everything was caused. The laws of causality don't mean literally everything is caused. There can be uncaused things like a necessary being. And so in the quantum field case, that would be the necessary being that was not caused, that caused everything else.
So the theist argument is my theist argument coming from like more, again, I'm more of a deist sort of viewpoint, right? God doesn't exist in any sort of way that we can even comprehend. Again, he's a metaphysical being. He does not follow the universal laws. There is no evidence that we have that says everything within existence has to follow universal laws.
Well,
just because,
hang on a second, Blank. If that's how you define God, then how does that differentiate from completely made up?
Because again, in my opinion, if you look at the orderliness and the structuredness of the universe,
no. I said, how does that differentiate from being completely made up?
Well,
like TJump's universe creating potato leprechauns.
Yeah, I mean,
what's the evidentiary differentiation there?
Again, like I'm not speaking from like a simple like specific like religious perspective. Like if someone wants to sit there and believe like, you know, potato eating leprechauns created the universe, okay, you cannot empirically prove the existence of a god.
So the question is what's the difference? What is the difference between your hypothesis and potato farting leprechauns?
Well, essentially, there isn't one. I mean, if you want to break it down to a very basic stance.
Okay.
Yeah. So
given
this, why would we believe that it was a god?
Laws like the causality. Like why is it that there is not that there is no driving force behind like what we can like empirically observe, you know? Well, why do you believe like why is there not a driving force behind that?
Intentionally. It really is simple. There's two arguments there, okay? As far as like an uncaused thing.
Yes.
You're saying that it's God, and you're saying it's God. TJump is saying that it's the quantum field. Okay? It's quantum fields. So it's one of the two. All right? Now the problem is that there's evidence for the quantum field, as TJump has laid out very succinctly. There's no evidence for the God. We have two uncaused things that everything comes from. One has evidence for it, the other one does not.
And again, so why isn't there a driving force behind the quantum fields?
The very same reason why there's no driving force behind your God.
Well, God exists in the metaphysical. That's my explanation.
Okay, well, there's nothing metaphysically. We don't need to appeal to anything metaphysical when it comes to the quantum field. It's there. We have evidence for it. Anything else?
The quantum field is metaphysical also. The quantum field is the fundamental first principles. There you go.
So there you go. There's your fundamental first principle. So it matches it. It's equal to it. But there's evidence for the quantum field and none for your God. So why would you fall on the side for which there's no justifiable reason to believe it? Other than a psychological, utility that it provides for you, but that doesn't make it true. So why would you fall on that and claim that it would be the case?
Why do I believe in that?
Yeah.
So, all right. What if you're wrong?
Is there more to that question? Because that's
it. What happens if you're wrong?
Okay, then he's wrong, and what? Eventually, science figures out what the right explanation.
There was a point in time when humanity didn't understand where lightning came from, and people said that it was God. Obviously. But now we understand where lightning comes from, and we understand the mechanism behind its existence. We understand why it happens, and we understand that it pretty much happens all over the universe. So. So now that we understand it, we were at one time wrong about it, and we attributed it to gods, but now we know that it's not, and now we know it's a completely natural thing that occurs. So we were wrong there, but now we're right. If we're wrong now about the quantum field, that means probably in the future we'll figure it out, and then we'll be right then when more evidence comes along. That's part of being intellectually honest with it. That we get more information. Hang on, Peter. We get more information, and then we add that to it. If that evidence is, if it's good, if it's sufficient, then we will change the position because we now know more and we understand more about the universe. But until that point comes, jumping to other conclusions is not rational. So how do you get to that? Like, why would you side with the thing there is no evidence for instead of the thing that there is evidence for?
Because if you sit there and if you want to live an atheist, like again, that's completely your choice. But if you sit there and you live an atheist life, that you don't follow any sort of like moral code or any sort of. I'm not. No. Hold on.
Whoa! Jump into conclusions there.
I'm not saying I'm not saying an absence of morality. I'm saying you're not following some sort of Oh my gosh!
Atheists have objective morality also. Moral realism is the majority view of atheist philosophers. So you still have objective morality without a God.
Right, and I didn't say that. But what if you're wrong and you sit there and you live, you go about your life.
Pascal's wager.
Yeah, you're gonna Pascal out of this, really?
What?
I got a question. What if we're wrong and we don't get 72 virgins in the afterlife, and you don't get 72 virgins in the afterlife? So now what?
It's up to 72 now.
Are you saying I'm Islam? I already said
okay. Are you saying that you are right and Islam is wrong? What if you're wrong?
I mean, if I'm wrong,
have you considered all the religions on the planet that you don't believe? So what if you are wrong? Which hell are you going to go to, and which hell are you most afraid of?
Which is why I say I align closely with deism. I believe in a God. I believe there's some sort of. I believe in creationism. That's
still not an answer to my question.
Right.
Still not an answer to my question because what if you are wrong?
You're just going to keep
you are wrong.
Me.
Well, let me.
I'm giving you a little.
Which hell do you think?
Peter. Hold on, Peter. Please let me talk.
Peter, let him finish. Peter, let him finish. Go ahead, Blank.
Okay.
Right. So that's why I prefer to look at it from more of a general creationist viewpoint. If you live your life, in my opinion, if you live your life along a pretty a more generalized moral code, you live it with like obvious values and virtues that are generally seen as good, then you'll likely be seen as like a good person in the eyes of the creator.
I get that. I get that. And what if you're wrong and a religion that doesn't adhere to what you just said is right? How much time do you spend on thinking about what if you are wrong? This is the dumbest question you can ask someone.
So
what if you're wrong? If you haven't considered the exact same thing for your position. So
I
what
have
if
considered
you
the
are
exact same
wrong?
thing for my position.
What if you are wrong?
So what?
Which
So
hell
what
are you
if
going
I'm
to
wrong?
go to? And which
Stop
hell would you
interrupting.
prefer?
Let him finish. Ask a question and stop talking.
I wasn't finished with the question, but
You asked it like
I'll
3 times, then
I'll
paused,
concede.
and then asked it again.
So again, you're asking the same question. If I'm wrong, if you look at the code, the moral codes across most religions, like they generally have common trends.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all
wrong?
exactly.
What if you're wrong if it's not most religions? What if you're wrong if it's the religions who do not fit into the most? What if you're wrong?
So you're saying, say, like something that's
I'm repeating your question back to you and pointing out how silly it is to ask this specific.
You're doing a terrible job.
I'm pointing out how silly your question is. And the fact that you keep dodging the question points out how silly your question is, because you ask us what if we are wrong while not having considered the fact
let me try to explain. So if let's suppose you die and you go to heaven, that's what you think might happen, and you're saying if you live a moral life, you're more likely that the God will see you in a happy light. But
exactly,
maybe it's the case that if there's no God, there's still an afterlife, like karma, dharma, chi, ki, yin, yang. There's all kinds of different fields and religions who don't believe in a God but still have an afterlife. So those are possible too. And those you don't need to believe in a God for any reason. And there's a God who only lets atheists into heaven. He only cares about rationality. That's it. If you're rational, he'll let you into heaven. If you're not rational and you believe in God with no evidence, he'll send you to hell. So it's possible that every different kind of belief you have could get you into heaven, and its alternative could get you into heaven. And so there's no way to assess the probabilities of one belief getting you into heaven and another that won't. Also, atheists live by a moral code. You don't need to believe in a God to live by a moral code. And so atheists would also get into heaven by what you said. You don't need to believe in the God to get into heaven. You just need to be moral to get into heaven.
So in my viewpoint, it's better to look at it from a perspective of someone coming, like being observed, right? Because ultimately we don't know what's after this life. Like it's something that will forever be unproven, right? Well, can we agree on that?
Not necessarily. We might be able to prove it one day.
Yeah.
And it's also good that you said it's in my viewpoint. And again, what if you're wrong?
So let's go back to the evidence thing. Do we have any
You
sort of
don't want to
evidence?
answer that question, do you?
Stop.
Why did you ask us?
Peter,
Why did you ask us the question if you don't
Peter,
want to answer the question yourself?
Peter, I have already explained, like, what if I'm wrong? If I'm wrong, then I am wrong. That's why I'd rather live a generally moral and follow specific values and virtues in my life that are seen from a wide perspective of humanity in general.
Yeah, you can do that without
and that's where you and I differ. I don't need a what if I'm wrong in order to live
Peter,
that life.
So Peter, in essence,
to live a moral life.
He's taking the Aurelius approach to it.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that I don't need the what if I'm wrong. I don't need a scare tactic to put me into leading a moral life.
Well,
it's my choice. And even if my choice would get me into some kind of hell, I would still lead a moral life. I would still prefer to lead a moral life. And then the God can do with me whatever he thinks after I'm dead.
I'm still lost on the part of the belief in God. Like, I don't, living a moral life is great. That's fine. I'm totally okay with it. Atheists do it too. But You don't
Yes.
need to believe in a God to live a moral life. Those are two separate things. So there's no reason to believe there's a God
Exactly.
and believe and live a moral life. You can just live the moral life, skip the God belief, and you'll be fine.
Exactly.
Well, then that just comes to a difference in opinion, man. Like
What is your opinion on that?
I mean, I've said it like the entire time. Like, I'd rather sit there and have that belief. It's not in
Why?
something else Peter said.
Okay, so blank, like I brought it previously. So it provides a psychological utility for you, correct?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a psychological utility, but I guess we can put it that way. Go ahead.
So yeah, so you can believe in what you want to believe in, which is no problem. I was like, if it provides a utility for you, then that's fine. But claiming that one particular thing is true over another one, or is demonstrative of reality over something else, especially when there's no evidence to support that, that becomes problematic. And so the matter of it is like I said before, is like being intellectually honest about it. So let's say that this entity exists and everything. So if this entity exists and it created everything and it created human beings, okay, what doesn't matter how, and we have the capability to be rational, to be critical thinkers, to evaluate evidence to the best of our ability, and to be honest when we approach these things. If the conclusion that is come to honestly and critically through an evaluation of the evidence, okay, and not accepting something out of fear or probability or out of, I'm kind of hedging my bets or trying to Pascal's wager yourself out of it. If the objective is to be critical, to be rational, okay, to use our functions, the functions of our brain that apparently have been given to us, then if there's no evidence for a thing and accepting that thing based on fear or because it feels good or it's a security blanket, whatever, would be intellectually dishonest. So what if the outcome is that we need to use the tools that were given us to come to the best possible conclusion and not accepting something just because, oh, well, I'm afraid of this or whatever. So maybe it's better to accept the evidentiary part and not make assumptions about the universe, right?
That's an extremely good point.
GL, it's worse. It's worse. If the only reason he leads a moral life is because there may be a threat after this life,
that's
then
what he was about to address.
Person,
Peter.
The God.
Peter,
no, hold
that's
on,
what he
hold
was
on.
about.
Let me finish.
That's what he was about to address. I want to hear his response. Blank, go ahead.
Let me finish.
I don't want him to lose his thought,
it's
Peter.
one sentence.
No, it's like, Peter, I don't want him to lose his thought. Blank, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
I know, but I want to point this out so he'll get a different thought. If the God is the only reason for you to lead a moral life, then that particular God, who's probably all-knowing, will know that that is your reason. So it wouldn't get you into a heaven anyway, because you're leading a moral life based on a threat. And if it had been your choice, you would lead a different life. So no matter how you look at it, if the only reason for you to lead a moral life is a God, then that God will deal with you once you die.
Hold on. Can I just
Blank. What were you going to say?
I'll come back to you, Warren, because that was a really good point. And so, Peter, that right there is a huge assumption that my moral code is based off of my belief, which it's more or less the opposite.
I didn't say it was.
Well,
I didn't say it was. I said if that is the case.
That's my 2 cents, and I'm moving on. Warren, can you please repeat what you said before?
Yeah. So in essence, what you're looking at from this perspective, and TJump actually brought it up before, and I think this is pretty much the last thing we can jump in, is that if there is a God and this God exists and it created us, and so we can say, it gave us brains, it gave us the ability to critically evaluate evidence, to think rationally, to come to conclusions based upon that evidence, and not jump to conclusions out of fear or speculation or supposition, or we can come to things intellectually honestly. When we use those faculties that were, if the God exists, given to us to the best of our ability. So the question that becomes, is that the point? So why wouldn't you use those faculties to the best of your ability and come to the conclusion? The conclusion happens to be right now in your lifetime, honestly, that there is no God, that this is what it is. And this is what I'm basing it on, because that's all I've got to work with. Instead of jumping to things out of fear or just hedging your bets or trying to Pascal's wager yourself out of it. What if that's the point?
That's an extremely good point, man. That's honestly that's part of what fuels my belief, and I'm going to twist it a little bit, because you're looking at it through rationalism, right? And I believe in like, with my views, the whole point of human existence of itself is to, because I also believe in objective morality, is to like, through metaphysics, through reason, through philosophy, find these metaphysical objective truths, right? And what you're saying essentially goes along with that line of thinking, and I honestly cannot give you a good rebuttal to that, because it goes along with what I think.
Well, I think as long as the approach is intellectually honest, and things are not just dismissed, for arbitrary reasons, that, the conclusions you come to are as honest as they can be, the evaluation of the evidence, and then I think you're heading in the right direction. That's why I think that, like I've always said before, when I'm having these discussions outside of these stages, you can rationalize yourself, or you can reason yourself to deism, and I have no problem with deism, because you can't eliminate it as a possibility. The sufficiently powerful enough entity kicked the football on the universe, pissed off with no evidence of its existence, doesn't really interact with us. It's just there. We can't defeat that. So sure, you can get yourself to that. I myself don't accept it, but that's just my personal position. I don't accept supernatural explanations for things, but you can do that. Going further than that, like, putting attributes to this thing, being, like adding things to it, then it becomes problematic, because then you run into the logical entailments of this thing. But getting to deism, I get that. I totally do. And I like that you hold to the Aurelius kind of position, live a moral life. If there are gods, and they're just, then they will, greet you by the values that you live by. And if there are no gods, then it won't matter, because you lived a moral life. People will remember you by the life that you lived. And if they are unjust, then you wouldn't have wanted to worship them anyway. So it works the other way. And I think that's the best position you could be in.
Sorry guys, I just need to point out that we've got quite a few people in the audience who'd like to also share their points of view, and so perhaps maybe we can wrap this up in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're at a stopping point.
Minutes.
Like, it's just a difference in, like, it difference in opinion, and like, I did in Warren too. I think you were also looking at the wickedness that's kind of attributed to, say, like, mainstream religions. Like, if you look at, like, historically Christianity, like Islam, like there are atrocities within the past that have been justified through religion, and there are negative connotations to religion. I'm not gonna deny that. I feel like most people who sit there and do deny that don't live in a very reality-based worldview. But
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What motivates your belief that the afterlife is a thing? Because you've said at the beginning you're a deist, and there's just like metaphysical truths that are important to discover. But when you were asked, you mentioned that nobody knows what happens after we die. You said that you're concerned with being judged, and it sounds like you're betting on, hoping for, and have a feeling that you need a belief that gives you an afterlife. That it sounds like it would be just to kind of assuage your fear of death. Is that the case?
Well, I wouldn't exactly put it like that. I'm not going to sit there and lie and say I don't have a fear of death. I think all human beings to a certain point have some sort, because, like, we're all naturally inclined to have a fear of the unknown, and death is one of those unknowns. And I wouldn't say, but I guess coming from, like, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it kind of is, because it's like, it's what if there is this afterlife? What if it is wrong? Like, again, like Warren was saying, the Marcus Aurelius viewpoint, coming at it from that perspective, like, you live a good, virtuous life, then you will like, and if the gods are just, gods are just, they will look down on you and smile.
But I could give you a lot of hypotheticals, like a what if, that you wouldn't put any stock in, right? It seems like you put stock in the what if something happens to you after you die and you're judged in some particular manner, particularly just because it scares you not to go somewhere, that non-existence is a scary thing. Now, like I think on the other hand, a lot of people accept death is most likely just a fact that you cease to exist, and they make whatever accommodation they can with that, but they don't force a worldview that just tries to give them a comforting, hopeful thought when there's no evidence to suppose that it's true, other than just that they have some like fear and desire for it to be true. Which is why I don't think you're really a deist, because you're more than a deist, right? You're kind of like an afterlifeist who's chiefly concerned with not having to face the possibility of non-existence being the most likely outcome of death.
Yeah, and I said at the very beginning, I like deist is probably the most general term, because I mean, I'm not huge into like the different definitions of, you know, what like I guess religious belief. You know,
but deism usually just means that God doesn't intervene. Right?
Yeah,
so
it's the God exists, but it's more based around free will, is my understanding.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, if God does intervene and has like a soul hotel where all the souls go and so on, I mean, I guess you could sort of call that deism because it's not in the physical world, but it seems like you're absolutely counting on God to have important consequences for your experience, to save you from suffering or torment or non-existence or something. And it's like there's not really, from an outside observer's point of view, a reason to suppose that's the case. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a mind independent of a brain doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to bet on something any more than it does like a Nigerian prince who's going to give you $1 million if you just wire him $10,000, right?
Yeah.
And no matter how much I want the $1 million, I'm being tricked out of a fear that I have of not having $1 million. It's not a good idea to bet on the Nigerian, email any more than it is to bet on the afterlife.
Yep. So, and I mean, okay, that's a pretty reasonable argument, but I mean, I kind of lost.
We're running short on time. So
I just lost my train of thought too. So,
we can come back again and revisit more of this if you like.
All right.
Thanks, Blank.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good time.
Appreciate you.
We've got other people in the audience. Sorry to rush you off there.
All right, so Bang desperately wants to come up and prove to us that a God exists.
Evidence, finally. He will do what no other has done before him.
I'm not even expecting to prove anything. I just wanted to discuss an idea, right? Which is why do we infer minds over things that we see around us that has certain characteristics, right?
If there's no natural process that'll produce a thing.
Yeah, well, that's just the assumption behind it, right? Like if you see some sort of
well, that's you asked why do we infer minds? That's why. It's because if there's no natural process that'll produce this phenomenon, then we infer a mind.
Yeah, but that's only an ad hoc realization. Like if I
that's
see
why we do it.
Something, whether it's natural or not, it should have certain characteristics that allow me to infer a mind. That me inferring a mind behind it is more reasonable than saying that this thing came from randomness, right?
I know of no such things. There's no such thing that like if there's an inherent characteristic of object X to infer mind. It's always if there's no natural process to produce this, we infer mind.
Can you define natural?
To be fair, all the artificial things that we observe are things that we created. So,
can you define natural process? I don't know what you mean by natural.
As an unguided, a thing without a mind that just does stuff. Gravity.
Yeah. Well, how would you know that? What makes you think that thing is unguided? Like what characteristics in that thing makes you think it's unguided?
Because we see things like hurricanes and we don't see any mind connected to them, so it's reasonable to infer there's no mind connected to them.
So you see certain Just the same thing I said. You see certain characteristics behind a phenomena or an object that you don't see that is sufficient to explain them, to explain it by a mind, right?
No, we just literally
Would
don't
be
see a
more
mind.
reasonable to be.
So like
Yeah,
I
but
see a
a
tornado.
mind is not sitting. You can't see a mind anyway. Like, even if I do
No.
something
So like
funny,
we see
you can't
tornadoes,
prove that I
no
have a
mind.
mind,
We
right?
see hurricanes, no mind. Gravity, no mind. We see lots of things that work in the reality with no mind.
You
No
see
mind
my
involved.
mind?
Well, I see effects of your mind. Yes.
Okay, that's the point, right? You don't nobody sees any mind, and the reason why I'm saying that, or I believe that inferring a mind behind the universe, right, is more or is best explainable by a mind, because we see the same characteristics in the universe or life as we do see in like things that we ourselves create, such as like the cars and stuff like that. Like, obviously, it will be more reasonable for me to look at
What
a house or a
characteristic?
building or a car. Well, I see information, right? I see complexity,
Wow.
and
Okay.
I see patterns, right? All these, when I
Information,
combine them
complexity, and
together,
patterns exist in crystals, like hurricanes, galaxies, stars. They exist in all things that
yeah,
don't have
exactly.
minds.
Yeah,
So there's no
information
minds.
and complexity and all that would also exist in whatever supreme mind created the universe. So then you would be begging the question as to whether or not that mind also has an additional supermind behind it.
I think TJump is the one making the question, because you can't say that those are things that exist in things that have no mind. We only infer things that we only infer a mind behind things because we see those characteristics.
You saying a
right?
mind isn't
No.
complex?
So hold up. So in physics, information is physical. It is a physical thing in a system. It has nothing to do with minds. Like no one in academia thinks information equals mind. That's not a thing. So the
Okay, let
consensus
me
in
ask
every
why.
field of physics is information is a physical system.
Oh, okay. Why do you think a car has a mind behind it? Like, why do you think it's more reasonable to infer a mind behind a car?
Because the
Because we
things
know
that
the origin of
entail
a car.
well, no, because the things that entail what makes up a car, there's no natural process that produces those features.
That's only an ad hoc. You haven't
That's
seen, like,
literally
what if you
in
haven't
all
seen the
of
car
one sec,
being made
in
though?
all of archaeology, in all of physics, and all in SETI, what they're looking for when they're looking for mind is a thing that is not produced by natural processes. That is the definition of how people search for mental processes in every field of academia. That is how they do it.
You haven't defined to me what a natural process is.
Like a physical force that is not guided by a mind that does stuff.
Okay, but that just doesn't make any sense the way you define it. Because how we create things, obviously you infer a mind to me, right? But
What?
I can say that I'm just a natural process, right? That, like, there's nothing necessarily that infers that I have a mind besides the
If
fact that
you
you
are
see certain
incapable of
characteristics in the way I
understanding
behave.
like wind, waves, tornado, not mind, then that's your problem. Like those are unguided natural forces. They are things not guided by a mind. If you think that they are things guided by a mind, you hold the burden of proof there. So we can, in physics and biology, say, oh, there's these processes that are clearly not guided by a mind. And is whatever we're looking at, is it a product of those things, or is it a product of a thing guided by a mind? And we can compare the difference between the two and be like, oh, look, the things not guided by minds do all kinds of shit.
Look, I think there's some miscommunication here. Look, I wanna make it clear that, look, the reason why you infer a mind to me isn't because you see a mind in me. Isn't because there's this thing called the mind that you can test in me or prove it, right? You infer it because it makes more sense that I'm saying all these words and this complexity and order and pattern, right? That you assume naturally that I have a mind that I can use to communicate information with you, right? Now you can take the same thing that I'm doing right now, the same characteristics about the phenomena, which is me, right, and apply it to other things that we see around us, right? You can see
No, not
your
right.
DNA. You can see how.
If you want to play that game, bang, and extrapolate induction and apply it to the entirety of the universe without modification,
I would really
you're
like
going to
to
have some problems
one-on-one.
because minds don't exist without physical brains, so far as we've ever observed. You have absolutely no evidence whatsoever, nor even a rational argument to provide for us that would demonstrate it's even possible for a mind to exist without some physical brain to generate it.
Yeah,
But that's
just
exactly what you
begging the
believe
question,
in.
though. You're begging the
It's
question.
not begging the question. You were the one using induction and extrapolating from that to draw some ontological truth about reality.
I'll tell you
And we're
why you're
pointing out
begging
to
the
you why
question.
that is erroneous.
I'll
But
tell
if
you
you
why
want
you're
to play
begging.
that game, then you need to be consistent. If you're going
I'll
to
tell you.
apply, infer into the rest of the universe from your local experience with reality, then you would have to be consistent with that. You don't get to cherry pick from your inferences and induction. Have you ever observed a mind that was not the process of a physical brain?
Yes.
You've seen a disembodied mind?
Yeah, I believe in
Where?
that. Now,
No,
just
you-
let me
I
let
didn't
me
ask if
let
you
me
believe in
let
one.
me just tell
No,
Caleb.
that wasn't the
Let me
claim,
just.
dude. Don't jump
Oh yes,
the
he
claim,
has.
dude.
He has asked me
You
if I
said
see
you
a
have
mind
observed
without a
it.
physical brain, right?
no,
You've
bang,
observed a
bang.
disembodied
Well, I
mind.
observed the effects of a mind. I mean,
No,
no
that
one can
wasn't.
fully
No,
observe a mind.
no.
That wasn't
Bang,
what I
bang,
asked you.
bang, bang,
That
bang.
wasn't the question, dude.
Contemporary neurophysiology. We can detect the presence of a mind. We're using technology. Yeah, okay, this is how we. So minds can create things. We understand this to be the case. Okay, so we see a car, and we can understand because we both observed that people have created cars. People have minds. We can actually detect the effects of a mind utilizing technology. We can also detect the lack of a mind using that same technology. So we have a brain. The brain has properties, and when the brain is functioning, we can hook it up, and we can understand when they have thoughts. We can actually see them demonstrated, played out before us. We understand these things. You just said that you observed a mind that was disembodied. A disembodied mind, you have observed it. But what you are observing are natural effects like hurricanes, waves, wind, whatever.
My voice
And then
is a
you are
natural effect,
saying
though.
you're
My voice
observing
is only a
natural
natural
forces.
effect.
You're observing natural forces, and you are saying that they are guided by a mind. What is the
Okay, look,
evidence
the
that supports this when you
look,
cannot detect the mind that is behind it?
look. I appreciate you guys are very passionate, right? But I would really like to keep this on one because it seems like each one of you has your own idea and opinion, right? Like TJump told me, oh, you can't. No one can observe any mind, even if you observe the brain. We can just infer that there's a mind because of the effects of it, and then other people are trying to like cover up each other's mistakes when they talk.
How
So
did you?
I want to keep
Okay,
this one on
so
one.
hang on a sec, just a sec, bang. You're not going to find conformity among atheists because diversity is. We're probably among the
Sure.
most
So
diverse
so
demographics
how
in
am
the
I
world.
supposed to
So,
discuss the topic then?
oh, hang on. You're presenting an idea, and so you're getting responses from people. So, if there's one of us that you think you'll be able to convince, then focus on that idea by all means.
Hey, then
So
but
the question
it's
still
not going to
stands.
go
So
anywhere.
the question still stands, Bang. How did you detect the mind that you are asserting is behind natural phenomena?
How did I detect the mind? Well,
Yes.
by observing its effect, which entail certain characteristics and phenomena. Right?
Which none of you haven't specified any, nor have
I
you
did.
argued that they're both positively indicative of and
I did.
exclusively concordant with a mind.
Look, when one of you told me that we can observe in physiology, we can observe the actual mind in the brain. Well, no, I disagree with you. We don't actually observe the mind. We observe that this mind has certain patterns and certain information that it can perceive and output, right? And because of that,
Bang.
we infer that this brain has a mind,
So the
or this
question was, is
brain
what did you
has a
observe
mind.
that was indicative of a non-physical mind? That's what they're asking. What did you observe that
Yes.
was indicative of a non-physical mind?
Well, the fact that, I mean, this comes from different arguments, but the fact that the creator of everything, right, is a non-physical entity, and that it's the cause of everything that we see, and because what we see around us entails different characteristics, therefore the creator would have a non-physical mind.
Okay, so that can all be explained by quantum field, no mind. So again, you said you observed a non-physical mind. I want to know how you observed a non-physical mind.
You can explain anything with anything. I'm saying I see
No,
that
you
as the
can't.
most
That's such a
reasonable.
childish endeavor.
You guys want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, I'm saying that
I
we
would
can.
like to,
Well,
yes.
I'm not even done with the idea though.
It does.
You guys don't even seem to actually want to engage in it.
No.
I mean, it's
Bang.
fine if you can. If you can, that's fine.
Bang. There's
Move on.
systemic. There's problems all throughout what you're asserting, and you've been asked us a very, very simple question. You made the statement that you have observed a disembodied mind. Okay, and we
No,
are
I
asking
didn't say
you.
that. I said I observed the effects of it.
That's fine.
You
The same way you observe the effects of my mind. Right?
No.
You observe
If I hook,
how
Bang.
it takes you in
sir,
English, right?
no, bang. If I hook your head up to an EKG, I can see those effects.
Well, he means consciousness. He
Yeah,
means
exactly.
he means literal
Well,
consciousness.
just out of curiosity, I mean, I
They're
don't even
only
know like what Bang would be arguing for, because when we talk about minds in the quantity and like the quality of human minds, and the way that we can measure, the cognitive faculties of a person, right? We're talking about physical interactions in the brain, electrical and chemical synapses, right? This is not what Bang is referring to. What
He's
Bang
talking
is
about
referring to
consciousness,
is a
pure
mind.
qualia.
Yeah,
talking
just
about qualia.
but devoid of any of those other constraints that we associate with consciousness. He's effectively trying to argue to us the existence of a triangle whose corners don't add up to 180 degrees.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Look,
That's
look,
exactly what you're
if
doing. You're
look,
attempting to
you
argue
don't
for a
have
mind,
to.
and yet you're excluding all of the common characteristics of a mind, like the property set of what we would
I'm
consider a
saying,
mind,
You're
and you're
engaging in
not
bad
allowing
faith,
us to go
Bang.
through that.
okay,
But
just
bang,
let me
bang.
respond to
Would
that.
this disembodied mind that you believe in not also be infinitely complex? I mean, you're talking about an emotionally and intellectually intricate intelligence that has the capacity to
No,
will things into existence out of nothing.
that's just a
And you're
straw
telling me
man.
that wouldn't be complex?
No, I don't. That's just a straw man. Like, look, I don't believe God is complex or His mind is, and that has nothing to do with whether
What does it mean for something to
mind.
be complex then?
Just let me reply to what you
What does
said
it mean
before.
to be complex?
Well, what it means to be complex is have a mechanistic function, right? That produce
No.
some sort of an outcome. Yes.
No.
Well, okay, define to me what complex is. I define to you.
It means a
What is
system with
complex?
many functioning parts that could be differently.
That's literally what I just said.
Well, it doesn't need to be physical.
Okay, well, I don't believe God has parts. So why should God be complex?
Yeah, minds have parts.
The
A mind is non-quiescent. It's never still.
a
It's a
mind has
constant, progressing,
qualities.
moving sequence of thought.
No, having qualities doesn't mean you have different parts.
That would still be complex. So if a mind can have different
Oh,
states, different thought patterns, different ideas, if there's a large number of different ways it could be, and they can produce different possible outcomes, that's complex.
no, that's not what the mind is. That's what the mind entails.
That means
Or
it's complex. So it
that's
entails a
that's
What the
complex.
fuck,
It's a
Bang?
complex system.
that's
That's what it means.
that's what the mind
This is
possesses.
embarrassing.
That's not what the mind is. Right?
That's-
If I know different facts, right? Like different distinct facts. If I know like 1, 2, 3, that doesn't mean that my
Bang, what
mind
does our
itself
mind and
is.
God's mind have in common?
I can't even properly respond to each one of you before the other one comes in. It's just
I just want to know, is there any common reference between the mind of God and the mind of human beings?
yes, the certain characteristic that I just told you.
What?
Pattern, information, and complexity.
So you're telling me that it is impossible for patterns, information, and complexity to exist without a mind to create them?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not a genuine position to have, because if you're going on with your daily life, you're not gonna assume that you have to see everybody's brains and physiology to know that what they created, right, comes from their own mind. Like if you
Yeah,
walk
the
across a
problem
building,
though,
wait,
Bang,
hold on.
is that when
If
we
you walk
create
across a
things, they're
building,
efficient, not
you're going to
complex.
let me finish. If you walk across a building, right, and you see that this building is like maintained well, it has all these whatever, right, all these characteristics, you don't have to see the person anyway. Yeah, I don't have to see who made it to know that this person is intelligent. This person has a mind. This person willed this thing to be the way it
Bang,
is.
would you consider
It's not a
somebody
product of
intelligent if they
random.
create something that's intentionally redundant and ineffective?
Give me an example of that.
The universe, the galaxy, solar system.
How is
a state or a vagus nerve?
How is it redundant?
Oh, just stick to the building analogy. You walk across the roof of a building, you see bird shit on the roof. Are you going to imply a mind, some complex mind, to explain
What
the
do
bird
birds have
shit?
to do with the building, though?
So
Well, we're
what they're
talking
saying
about
is
witnessing.
that the universe doesn't look like a building. It looks like a rocky mountain that just kind of fell together randomly. It does not look like a building. When you look at the universe, you don't see indications of design. You see indications of random forces doing random shit.
Really? Okay. How? So
Look,
let's say
you're
that
making,
if
you're
in
trying to
order
make
to
a
make a house,
comparison to
do you
something that we
need?
can empirically see. Bang,
Yeah.
listen, dude. You made
Bro,
the
let me respond to
comparison.
TJump, man. Like I can't talk, man.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Look, when you come across a building, you're gonna see certain characteristics that have to all be at um uh, built together at the same time to make that house a house and make it function and make it the way we infer that there's a mind behind it. You're gonna have to see walls. You're gonna have to see
Wait,
doors.
I'm
You're
not.
gonna have to see all these things that
So,
exist
so
together at the
wait,
same time.
one sec.
The same way the universe. I haven't even made the analogy. Bro.
Right, but
Like,
I want to
the
just
analogy here is that the universe has different.
I want. So if you come to a mountain, there are certain facts that have to be true for it to be a mountain. When you come to a lake, there are certain facts that have to be true to make it a lake. Like every object that you see, there are
which infer
certain
mind.
facts that have to make it the thing that it is. It's not just true of designed things. So what you're saying is just
which I think entails a mind.
no, mountains don't entail minds. Lakes don't entail minds. Rivers don't entail minds. So if your argument is just that there are certain facts that entail it is the way that it is, everything has that whether or not it was created by a mind. So that's not an argument that the universe had a mind, is that because there are facts the way it is are required to be the way it is.
Okay,
Just
I
hear
mean,
what I
look,
said before
that's
I
fine. That's
disconnected.
fine. I mean, I'm just saying, with your position, you're not going to be able to be consistent with the idea that I myself has a mind. Like I could
I'm perfectly consistent. I can infer you have a
throw.
mind because I have a mind, and I can say my mind does certain things, and you do the same certain things, and they don't happen without minds.
That's the same thing I'm using. I'm saying
No, because
I
there's
can
none of
see
the things in buildings exist in the
effects in the
universe.
universe.
There are
I
no
can see
effects in the
effects
universe that are analogous to a
more
mind. None
complex
of
than
them.
what I can do. I can see things in the universe that are more complex than whatever I can do, right? Even if I had like 10 lifetimes, I would never be
Complexity
able to
is
reach
not a
such
Oh my God,
feature of the
Bang,
mind.
this
of doing something what I
harping
see
on
about the universe.
complexity is literally
So,
just saying, I don't understand it, too hard, brain too small, must be a genie. Like
well,
that's such a low brain
that's the same
argument.
thing you do with human beings.
Complexity
No, it's not.
complexity means nothing.
It is.
Complexity
It is-
means nothing. It's just the amount of parts involved in something.
So if I see a cave painting of a very bad ox, I don't think, oh my God, this is so complex. Only a mind could do this. What I say is there's no natural process that could do this. There's natural processes that do things far more complex, like the certain octagon shaped squares that are like covering a different beach that was all produced by a natural process. That's far more complex than poopy cave paintings. But the poopy cave paintings I know came from a mind because there's no natural process that produces those things in the area. That's what
How would you
does
know
it.
that? How would you know that?
Because we see the natural processes that do those things and they aren't there.
You're begging the question again. That's
No,
just an
that's
assumption
perfectly rational.
that
That's a
things
perfectly
like that can
rational
produce.
inference. It's called rational inference.
Well,
It's called
okay.
abduction.
Well, I'm doing the same.
No,
Okay,
you're
look,
not.
Then
No,
just
you're not.
show the
I'm
mind.
just
Show
gonna,
You're
the
I'm just
literally
mind.
gonna
just
say that. I'm
inventing
just gonna say
nonsense.
this one last time, and I'm gonna just move on because I don't think it's going. It's fine.
So, Bang, the whole
I-
thing that happened here
I'm-
is they asked you for evidence of an immaterial mind, and then you presuppose God, and then you said God has an immaterial mind, or you described God as an immaterial mind, and then presupposed it exists, and then said that
It doesn't matter if it's material or
somehow
not, though. It doesn't matter. It's
impacts
irrelevant whether it's
reality.
material or not.
But that's not what they were asking. They were asking, how do you know that immaterial mind is even a category? Because mind appears to be connected to physical.
No, that's irrelevant to whether minds exist. I don't
No,
see
it's
anywhere
not.
in the definition of a mind that it has to necessarily be physical.
They were
That's
asking you
just something
Holy
you
crap,
both like
show
made
the
up.
that's so
category
embarrassing.
You
exists.
literally just made that up. Like there is no
Bang,
definition
bang,
of a mind where it
bang.
has to be
I
physical.
want you to listen very carefully. You are making an inductive argument, okay? You are observing a pattern or sequence within nature, and then you are extrapolating that to the whole of reality without modification. Barring the wild, inappropriate nature of that, I am asking you, based on your inductive reasoning, have you ever observed a mind that is non-physical?
That's just a dumb question. No one can observe a mind. No one can observe any mind. We can only observe physical phenomena
So
that we
let me
infer minds from
clarify.
because we
Okay,
see
so the
certain
answer is
characteristics
no.
of
We can
ways.
move on.
He's saying that you're using induction.
So
He's
you
saying
haven't seen my mind.
your
So
evidence.
what makes you think you're not talking to a robot? Right
What
now?
he's saying
It's
is
interacting with your mind, dude.
what he's saying is you're using induction. You're using induction to say that look, there's this inductive pattern of things we see, and these are inductively often caused by minds. But if you use
Yeah.
induction as evidence, induction seems to indicate that all of the minds we see are produced by brains, and so if there's no brain, there's no mind. So if your evidence is inductive, then you have to include the other inductive evidence that goes against your hypothesis, which is what he's arguing.
Well, the reason why I'm saying it's an immaterial mind has nothing to do with whether it's a mind or not, right? Now there are other arguments to show why that mind, right, would be immaterial, but that's irrelevant to whether it's a mind or not, right? Now, even if I'm making the argument that there's a physical mind behind all of this, you're not gonna just agree with me and move on, right? There's no point of agreeing with that point.
Well, if you
Now-
showed
now-
us that that was something that could exist, we would have no choice but to accept it because it would be true. Because that would be, well, true.
I mean, convincing you at this point is out of the question. So, look, I'm just
Well,
gonna
it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be if you presented. No, bang. It wouldn't be if you presented evidence, which you have not.
Sure. I mean, I don't even know what you mean by evidence.
That which can differentiate imagination from reality. Evidence.
And I'm going to ask you to define reality. I'm just going to go on. There's no point.
All that exists.
Look, what
Which present?
Yeah, look, we're just gonna go in circles. Look,
Yeah, if you have to ask
this
stupid questions like
time
what
I
is
had this
existence, that means
discussion.
just you have failed. You have just failed at any
No,
intellectual honesty.
it's not a dumb question.
It's a pretty dumb question.
Obviously you think it's a very intuitive, like existence is a very intuitive idea that
Yeah, all
it
things that
seems
are non-imaginary that exist in
counter.
reality. Like it's not a hard concept.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
just waiting for you
because
to
you think
show
it's
that
too
an
intuitive,
immaterial
right?
mind is a thing, or a consciousness that exists outside of the
Yeah,
physical is a thing.
the
We're
statement
well,
was that
totally
you said that
open.
you had evidence. So
Yeah, we're totally open, dude. Just demonstrate it's true, and we'll accept it.
The evidence is the effect. Look, I'm just gonna. I'm literally just I want to conclude because I know for a fact I'm not gonna go anywhere right with this. I just want to conclude, right? So the reason why we as human beings in our day-to-day life, when we see a text on our phone that says, "Hey, come on to dinner at 8 p.m." We're never gonna even think for once that this message could have been an outcome of random processes, right? Because we see the effects of the message, we see the complexity of the letters combined together.
No,
We see
it's not the
that
complexity.
we
It's
see that
literally
this
not the
entails
complexity.
we
I've
see
already
we see
addressed
that
that.
this entails information, right? So I
No,
don't
it's not
have
the
to see the
information.
person's
That's
mind
literally not the information.
or
Ian.
have to see his brain to know that this person has a mind and he intentionally sent me this message, right? So that I can do something about it, right? Now, when it comes to how I see the universe around us, I see that, for example, the DNA, the fundamental forces, physical forces, right, or constant um, forces of the universe, right? All of these need to be in a very fine-tuned manner, right? And they all need to be true at the same time.
No.
Now you're
Okay,
going to look
Otangelo.
at the trees
And how
into
that
fine
happens.
tuning.
Yeah,
Again,
Okay,
the
so
fact that
DNA
trees
is
exist
God's
is,
text message to you. Got it.
I mean, if all of these nuclear, not nuclear, these universal constants don't exist, then there wouldn't be any tree. There would be nothing for you to even talk about.
All you're saying, Bang, is that if the universe were different, the universe would be different. No shit.
No, there will be
So
no
you
universe.
provided
There
no
will be no universe.
explanation for anything. You're just making claims. Can you show us some type of evidence?
Well, I
or
think
you're
we
just gonna
should
keep
move
making
on
claims?
because he's been here for a
Yeah,
while.
If the
we
universe wasn't the
should
way
move
that it
on.
is, the universe
Take it
wouldn't
easy,
be the
Bang.
way that it is.
No,
Brilliant
there will be no
observation,
universe.
Bang.
There will be.
The
I
universe
agree.
wasn't
I
the
agree
way
with
that it
you,
is.
John.
The universe wouldn't be the way that it is. I mean, where else can you go to get that kind
I
of
think
profound revelation?
so. His main argument is that complexity and information are indicative of a mind. Both of those things are just objectively false. So because like the big hex squares, I forget what there's like a beach of just a bunch of hex shaped rocks. Those
Yeah, I know what you're
those are
talking
super
about. Yeah.
complex. Those are not a product of a mind. Information is defined as a stochastic physical system in Claude Shannon's information theory paper. Literally no one defines information as having anything to do with the mind. This is a stupid creationist definition. So both of his claims are objectively provably false. Therefore, his argument is debunked.
The other problem is that he continually compares things that we have designed, right? Things that we know are designed because we designed them. But, I've given him this analogy before and he flailed around with it. But if you were walking down the side of a river and you come across a dam, how could you tell the difference between a dam that was built by beavers and a dam that was the consequence of natural flooding? Cosmetically, they don't look they don't look very different from one another. But if you've ever seen a beaver dam before, you would know the characteristics or set of properties a beaver dam possesses, and you would be able to compare the present dam to what we know as beaver dams, and you would also be able to look around and see if there's any beavers to have created this dam. You would be able to find specific indicative evidence.
I think a better example is like if you're watching across a beach and you find a tesseract, would you infer the tesseract is designed or a product of natural processes? And how? What is the methodology you would use to differentiate between the two? So if you come up with an object that we've never seen before, we know no natural processes, no design process that would produce them, how would you infer one or the other? And that's where they kind of get caught. Like,
That's a great example, actually, the Tesseract, because a lot of people will probably immediately assume that it was somebody designed it and left it there. But yeah, there's so many things we can get into with that.
Argue something yet?
So Icarus has been waiting with you.
Icarus, welcome.
Hey.
What you got for us today?
I'll just put my basic statement out. I do believe in God, that is one thing, but I am willing to be convinced on, oh, he's not the creator of all things. I mean, when you have a being that literally said, and if I remember this right, or killed a bunch of people with an asteroid and angels because they were too problematic for me to actually help. And then I sent my son to fix all the issues that I happened to forget humanity caused because Adam and Eve didn't seem to know, don't touch the fucking fruit I told you about. Then hey.
Okay, do you have
sorry.
evidence or something? Like, I think it's all fairy tale.
Oh, I think I think of it more like mythology.
I agree. So would you agree God doesn't exist?
It's more, I believe in some form, but I am more or less like, hey, it's easier to take the Bible as a book of myths than it is about true history of what happened to humanity.
Okay, so do you yourself believe in a god or gods?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Okay, so why? Yeah.
It's just easier on my mind to think, oh, there is something in the sky taking care of us, instead of, oh, we're all left on our own to possibly die with no idea what we're doing.
That's
so it provides
nice.
It provides that psychological utility for you?
Yeah. That's why I think religion is so important. It's a way for people to not, freak out about it. It's one less stress on the person's mind on where will I go when I die. Who knows? But hey, at least religion says that you'll go to a heaven.
Or
Do
not,
things
or a
that you
place of
like
like
have an
infinite,
impact
incomprehensible
on
torture.
reality? Do things you like have an impact on reality? Is it just because you like to think that makes it real?
Icarus, how old are you?
Oh, 20, I believe.
So you lived
Okay, I'm old
on
enough to
Earth.
be your father.
Okay, Jack, here's my point.
I love how
you've been
that's
alive
phrased.
for,
be his
20
grandfather.
years. Okay.
I love the caveat. 20, I believe.
Ostensibly, so
Sorry.
you had been born
I'm
in
trying to remember. Do I
2002
need
or
to be
2003,
precise?
right?
Because
No,
I
no,
am
no.
20 at
No.
current.
You don't need to be
Oh,
precise. It's just, I like the way you worded it. That's all I'm saying. It's really, really
Well,
cool.
hold on. I'm going to try to go somewhere with this. So, like this idea of life after death has always befuddled me, right? Because Icarus, were you alive prior to your birth? Were you aware of anything?
I mean, I can't prove it, so I'm not going to say yes.
Do you have memories prior to, say, 1995?
1995. That's a really specific year, but no, I
Well, if
don't.
you're 20, you certainly weren't alive in 1995, so it would follow that you have no memories prior to 1995. I, for instance, don't have any memories prior to probably 2003, because that's when I first realized I was aware of myself. But I was born in 97, right? So there were thousands upon thousands of years prior to my birth that I wasn't alive for or present for, and I was never inconvenienced by it in the slightest. But I've been alive for 25 years. You've been alive for 20 years. And you think that unless you live for all of eternity, this world that we have is just meaningless and scary. Right? You have to be the singular infinite thing in a finite universe. Everything else dies, but you got to live forever. And you want to live for all of eternity. You've been alive for 20 years, and you think that it's not worth it without eternity. Never ending.
Oh, if I've been alive for 20 years and yet I want to live for eternity, is that it? Because sorry, I kind of was listening, but also gave myself a cup of water.
Okay. All
I
right.
am really
So do
self-conscious
you...
about my voice too.
that's fine, Icarus. My point is that human beings have an incredibly meek perception of vast time. Right? It's difficult for us to conceive of a few hundred years, let alone eternity. Okay, this Earth, 4.5 billion years, and there were entire worlds of completely alien to us if we were to develop a time machine and go back to those eras, and it would be so foreign that it would be not comparable to anything that we've observed in our modern world. And different animals and creatures, and even some sentient beings such as Neanderthals and Denisovans and Cro-Magnons, they all existed way back when. We've never had any experience with any of them, right? That's how great time is. I mean, we're talking eons and eons and eons and eons of time. You've been alive for 20 years, and you want to be alive for all eternity.
I mean, it's nice. It's a nice thought. That's all I can really say about why I want to live for eons or whatever it is.
It's
Why?
a nice thought. It's a nice thought. So Icarus, let's attack that. What's your favorite food?
Pizza.
What's your favorite pizza?
Pizza.
So now
cheese-
imagine that for the next 10 years, all you get to eat is pizza.
That would be fine. I would
Not
love that. That's
different
totally fine.
pizzas, and not different pizzas, but one specific pizza.
I'd still be fine with that.
How long do you
Sounds pretty
think
good.
it's going to be your favorite food?
Still gonna be my favorite food. I love pizza.
Sounds like a
I would
good
eat it
idea,
every
man.
day
Maybe-
for like 10 years.
I would take
no
it.
problem.
Maybe a couple months, because eventually I would just get sick of eating pizza over and over.
Exactly. So if you're going to live forever, how long do you think it's going to take until you really want out?
Never. I would live forever,
Mm.
not a problem. That's not even a real issue. That's like such a silly question. Like I would want to live forever, no problem. I would like
Yeah,
to
I
eat
wouldn't.
pizza forever.
How
no
long would
problem.
I want to
I
live
don't
for?
think anybody who says they want to live forever really puts thought into that.
No,
Yeah,
Everything
that-
you
that-
can
that's-
learn and do.
a thing that
over-
exists
That's
eternally.
exactly
a thing that exists eternally has no value. The fact that things are temporary is the reason that they have value.
No,
the reason
that's
that
not,
you. The
no,
reason,
no,
yes.
no.
Yes.
Like if you're an eternal being, you still have value.
TJump, you're wrong.
You're still morally valuable, regardless of the duration you live.
I didn't say morally valuable. It says any kind of like value because it's just there. It's always there. It's never not going. It's never going to not be there. So therefore, there's no supply and demand. There's no valuation to it. It's simply it's there.
Like monetary value, like it still has moral value.
Any kind of value because it will
kind of
always
value.
be there. The reason that things have value is because they are temporary.
No,
is because they will not
Yes.
always be there. So
no, it's literally false. Like
Yes.
if you're eternal, it's not like you lose your value. Say you choose to be eternal, do you lose value? Like no, you're still
You
equally as
don't lose your
valuable.
value. Everything you experience loses value.
That's also false. That's simply a psychological state. There's infinitely many
That's
ways
not
to
false.
maintain value. Like you could just erase your memory
just
when you
because
want.
it's a
Like,
psychological TJump, just because it's a psychological state doesn't make it not important.
what? I said it was important, so I'm saying it's important.
I was
like,
originally just going to ask what your guys' positions on this were, so I can actually work from there. But hey, if you guys want to continue arguing, go right ahead.
Yeah, let's get back to Icarus instead of bickering amongst ourselves.
Actually, that's why I was just kind of being quiet. I wanted to let you guys finish your talk, then you go, all right, back to you.
This is what you get with atheists. They don't agree on anything.
I know.
This is what they
Oh,
do.
are you all basically just atheists, or are you different kind of atheists?
It's a good mix.
Every atheist is different.
I am the right
what I
atheist, and everyone else
now,
is the wrong atheist.
which is why we argue.
TJump is the right atheist. All of us are left atheists. So.
I'm a deist. All these guys are just 14-year-old kids that are mad about going to church.
I like going to church. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm actually okay with that.
Let me tell you this.
I'm actually okay with that.
I was basically the same for a good couple years of my life. I hated going to church just because, I'm going here by force because my parents say I must believe in God, and I was baptized when I was like, 5, 6? So I just kind of went with it. Like, eventually I actually read the Bible and was like, oh, hey, there's some fun stuff I could use, if I wanted to draw.
Like
I
the
wasn't intending that
Second
to
Kings.
be a
Also read the
segue.
part that. Did you also read the parts that aren't actually the fun stuff?
Just mostly stuff from the Old Testament. That's currently where I am.
So all the
Testament, I'm just
genocide,
kind
the
of-
genocide, God killing off the entire planet. That to you, that's the fun stuff. Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't think genociding people is fun, but it at least makes a cool story.
Oof.
So
Well,
you
I think
think
we've- I
that
think we've pushed
killing
this to the
killing
end.
people is okay as long as it provides you with a fun story?
Yes.
No. No, not really.
Oh,
It's
TJump.
just that I think it's
Background
because
noise.
I think it's just a story. I don't really have to feel any problems with it. If it was real, then I would have some issues like, oh, well, that's horrifying. But hey, we're not here to argue is God
Hold on.
is God a
That's
good
important.
or evil
You
being.
said if. Hold on, that's important. If it's real, so you don't think the Bible is real?
Again, I brought it up earlier. I see the Bible as a book of myths, not a true historical book.
So the God of the Bible is just a myth.
As much as like similar to Zeus,
We
you
agree.
wouldn't want him to be the ruler. You wouldn't want him to be ruling you, now would you?
No.
I don't. What?
So what's the
I
God you
don't.
believe in?
I don't want anybody ruling me, actually.
No. So what's
Yeah,
the God
I
you
know.
believe in, Icarus?
At least not devoid of accountability. I mean, obviously,
Hmm?
in order for a society to function, there needs to be some sort of governing authority, but they need to be held accountable by something.
Yeah.
Right? When it comes to like deities, particularly the Christian God, what you're talking about is a cosmic tyrannical despot, accountable to nothing or no one, with complete and total sovereign control over everything. It's basically a celestial North Korea. But as Christopher Hitchens said, at least you can fucking die and leave North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a fun description of God. I would have thought of him as an moody teen who has his son be his straight man.
What?
All right.
Oh,
Icarus.
Jesus
Well,
is
this
his
has been
straight man,
everything,
keeping
but
him
as
from
we get
killing
along.
him.
Icarus, you just said that the God of the Bible is a myth. So which God are you advocating for, and how do you know he has a son?
What do you call? I'm trying to remember what I call which one I fall under. Protestant, I think. Wait, no. What is Protestant actually?
So Icarus, do you believe in the Christian God?
Yes.
Okay. So why do
Christian
you
God
believe
didn't
in the
have a
Christian?
son.
So why do you believe in the Christian God?
Well, I was raised on it, and I don't really have anywhere other religion I really want to go to.
Okay,
Do you
so
think
I
the
think
Christian God actually exists, or is it? Do you believe in the Christian God as? I don't even know how you do that, but because you said it was mythology earlier, so I'm super confused now.
Don't worry, that's just how my mind works, and unfortunately,
Is the Christian
that's
God
not
a real
uncommon.
character, or is it mythology?
Sort of a mix in my mind. His actions don't make him a character. What I believe in is just the concept of there's something up there that I can believe in and not feel completely afraid that when I die, there will be nothing. Absolute and utter nothing. And I
Okay,
will be
well,
just staring at a void until the end of time.
I don't want to be the atheist that takes away your security blanket, Linus. So if that
Oh,
works,
don't worry. I have no security blanket.
If
You guys want to prove me wrong? Go right ahead.
If that works for you, I think that you
I
have
love the I love the
I think
addition
that
of
there's a
Linus.
lot of work that you still need to do and questions you need to ask. So I guess keep looking up, keep asking questions. I don't think there's much more.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we
Jill,
understand. I think it's
have to
understood.
ask
I think it's
how
understood that
many
the
people.
reason. No, I think it's understood
Jill,
that
I
Icarus.
have to
The
ask
reason
how many
Icarus
people do
believes.
you think got the Linus thing?
Whoa. Hey, time everyone. You're kind of just jumbling together on my mic.
So I think we've come to the conclusion that Icarus believes in what you believe in because it's what you've been taught, and it does provide a psychological utility for you, and that's fine. You got a lot of years ahead of you. You got a lot of years ahead of you. So keep doing the work.
So I didn't really convince you guys that there is a God more than that I believe there is a God. That I believe in a God.
We already knew
but that.
that.
Doesn't
I don't think you're convinced because all you've brought to the table is that you like it to be, but apparently you don't care about what is real and what isn't. You just want to live a fantasy world in which things exist that you like to be there.
Chris. We appreciate
Okay,
you coming
now
up.
that-
We do have quite a few people in
Now-
queue. It was definitely an interesting conversation,
Alright.
but we do need to move on.
Alright.
Skorak is next
Icarus.
in line. Oh, thank you, Icarus,
Thank you.
by the way.
Sorry, Tom. Just give me a second.
You're breaking up.
Chris, thank you for joining us. Yeah, very much.
We do appreciate you coming up in your time, and you've
Uh,
asked good questions. Skorak, is it right now?
Randolph, I think you're breaking up.
Icarus
I
for
can't
joining
really
us.
hear you.
Hello, greetings.
People are cutting me off.
Hey, Skorak.
Yeah,
Give us
Randolph,
1
you
second.
keep cutting out.
Yeah, Randolph, you're breaking up quite a bit. I don't know if you can hear us.
I can hear you. Is this better?
That's better.
That sounds good. All right, Skorak.
Thank you.
What do you got for us today?
Hello. So before we start, as I said in the chat a couple times, I am actually an atheist. So this is just an argument I had, and I was like debating with myself for the existence of God. So I came here hopefully to like either see it dismantled or have it maybe change the mind of some people. I don't know.
Sure.
So all right. Okay. Let's see. So
If you
what I
have
was
it in written
thinking.
form, Scrack, if you have it in written form and you're going to read it out, if you could paste it in the Heathen text chat, just so everyone in the audience and all of us included can all see it, if you have it written.
Very well,
and I'll
lads.
reshare it. I'll reshare it to YouTube.
I don't know how well written it is because I did kind of do it. I think, but I think it's fine. Let me post it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Go for it. Go for it.
All right.
Great, we can see it. Go ahead and.
All right. So, what I was thinking is that since I do believe in evolution, and usually most species when they evolve certain characteristics, it is with a cause. They don't usually just spontaneously evolve stuff that don't help them in any way, or if they do, eventually they get weeded out. Human sapiens, I haven't really found a reason why, like a convincing reason why that was a characteristic that had to be, developed. The theorem I found that's more leading is that it was evolved because of humans' social structures. Like social structures were too
Wait,
complex.
which characteristic are you talking about?
Sapiens.
Sapiens?
Yeah.
Like, so which part of sapiens? Sapiens is just like a word for human.
No, sapiens as in the characteristic our minds have, where we think on a certain level that other creatures in our planet cannot really reach.
Sentience. Gotcha.
All right, sentience. Sorry, I'm Greek. But yeah, sentience.
Well,
you needn't apologize for being Greek. Yeah.
All right. Well, but yeah, that's what I was thinking, and I found that said that it's social structuring, but I don't know, that doesn't seem that convincing to me, because social structures had to come along as the brain was evolving. We have other animals in nature that have a complex social structures, and yes, they are intelligent usually, but humans take it to a completely different level. Like, it's insane, And I was thinking that maybe in that case, since one of the most unorthodox features that sentience gave us was this ability to ponder the metaphysical and ponder something that we cannot touch or interact with physically, maybe that was some sort of this also has some sort of reason for existing, and there is a creature that can only be interacted with metaphysically.
So I would say that our sentience is a result of the fact that higher cognitive abilities gives us an evolutionary advantage. We can build tools and kill things easier, and that leads to certain kind of mystical thinking, which isn't very beneficial. So like type 1 and type 2 errors are when if you hear rustle in the bushes and you think it's a lion, you run away. And if you think it's the wind and think you're going to go through the scientific process and wait for more evidence, you get eaten by the lion. And so humans who have this tendency to think it's a agent of some kind tended to survive more, and so we had this very powerful level of sentience, which has this ability to come up with certain ideas which are false but beneficial, and these false but beneficial ideas led to certain kinds of abstract thinking that are just don't correspond to reality.
All right. I am definitely inclined to agree with you, but I will kind of push it a bit further because, there are some ideas. Doesn't that seem a bit out of, turn, though, with how we've seen evolution work for, other animals? Yes, they have, the path is similar, but why are we so far ahead?
Because
So there's
anything
three
that
areas of
if one slight advantage is given to one species, that species takes over, just kills everything else and completely takes over. And so the fact that we got there first just means that's why. And it would expect that anything that got there first would then immediately take over and get super, super, super far advanced. Because we're selecting for this feature, it grows at a higher rate than animals that don't intentionally select for this feature. And since we got the feature first, we took over first and started to select more for that feature, which caused an exponential growth and gave us a head start over everything else.
All right, so you do believe this is just another, completely natural effect of, how's it called, evolution, and the, I guess, possibility for spirituality is just a side effect.
Yes.
I would agree, yeah.
All right,
It's
yeah,
more
no.
the claim that we're super exceptional is not as strong as it seems, right? So the areas that are primarily responsible for the things that we're supposed to be the best at, mostly language and the ability to manipulate abstractions through language, are Wernicke's area and Broca's area. There's homologous areas in other primates that are closer to us in evolution that shows it's a gradual trend. Like chimpanzees also have a more pronounced Wernicke's area and Broca's area, right? And so the sort of human exceptionalism, it's like, oh, there just aren't any animals that can do anything like us, kind of falls apart when you look at, for example, crows solving complex, fairly sophisticated multi-step puzzles that require grasping abstractions about how machines work and what the consequences and cause and effect relationships of different machines are, where they do 12-step puzzles that are randomized every time in the first try because they understood the properties of the machines involved, right? So there really are isolated examples of each of the capacities that we see in humans, other than the highest level of language, which is grammar, basically. In one animal or another, you find them, and the reason that we think that makes sense is because they're going to develop these capabilities if they need it, right? So there's usually a selection pressure that will explain a given capacity. Otherwise, it's just not necessary. It's like a waste of energy to have a brain that's much more sophisticated than you need to survive, right? If fruit literally grew from every place in the world and was infinitely supplied and no animal needed to struggle to compete for it, you would expect less evolution of capacities that are sophisticated to get around problems that didn't exist. And one of the explanations for human development is that the environment that early humans settled in was increasingly difficult for them. And so they had to keep pushing their limits in terms of tools, constructing cave and then dwelling and garments and so on. And that's what we call the extended phenotype of the species, right? So we developed these external capacities to handle more and more difficult environments as we spread throughout the planet into environments that other animals couldn't spread to. And they stayed confined to a geographic region that was suitable for them. Once you have the ability to start pushing into new regions, you can just keep doing that. And the further you go to the Eskimos in the Arctic, and you have people who live at the equator, and that's the same species, that's a good explanation for how our capacities kept increasing, because we just kept pushing the envelope in ways that other species didn't have to, right? Dolphins have so much fish to eat. There's no reason for them to take their brains too much further, even though they're very smart. Humans in the early Fertile Crescent area probably developed civilization because it was so hard to do agriculture. It was actually a very difficult floodplain to grow food on because it would flood and the mud wasn't very good and so on, even though we think of crescents as being really good. And so agriculture developed aqueducts and canals, rather, to handle that very difficult climate. And what ended up happening was the birth of civilization. So there's an analogous kind of emergence in culture as there is to in biology, that difficult circumstances and the need to overcome them tends to drive continuous improvement.
All right, yeah, that does make sense. Is there an explanation as to why that phenomenon seemed to have happened with the same, let's say, speed no matter where humans were, how's it called, settled? Because I can't imagine that, like, living in, let's say, the Mediterranean was as hard as living, you know, like, in Scandinavia, you know?
It didn't.
Like, why wouldn't the Scandinavian people be more advanced in that aspect?
Different selection pressure. So, like Jews specifically, Ashkenazi Jews, the Jewish culture specifically selected for more intellectual features, which is why they have such an advantage on intellectual avenues of success, why they have such a disproportionate level of Nobel Prizes and are leaders in banking and art and industry. We didn't all select at the same level.
All right. Yeah, I think my query has been answered. Honestly, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Thank you, Skorik. Appreciate you coming up and giving us some challenge.
Yeah, same. Have a good one.
Take care.
Have a great day. Thank you for coming up. Next in queue is Zero Wing, who wants to argue the Kalam, it sounds like.
That's what he told me.
Oh, someone in the audience has been hoping this would come up, so great.
Fantastic. All right,
Hey, Zero Wing,
what do you have for us?
Main screen turned on. Somebody set a house bomb. How are you, gentlemen?
Zero, if you're on your phone, you may need to transition to a laptop.
What you
You're
say?
I could hear him just a moment ago.
I could hear our stream. I could hear our stream through his mic.
Main screen turn on.
Oh.
Somebody set up.
Yeah, we don't want the echoing. Zeroing. If you don't unmute, then we'll probably talk to somebody else and then bring you back after them.
You have no chance to speak without mic. Make your time.
Use hand signals and smoke signs.
All right, we're going to go ahead
I
and
just
move on to the
messaged
next
him.
one.
Let's
Feel
see if
free
he
to raise your hand
responds.
again if you are capable of talking.
Blink twice
Maro?
for yes, once for no.
Maro,
Try to get
you're
your
up
mic.
next.
Try to get your mic working for great justice.
Hey, Maro.
Damn, that's disappointing.
Okay,
Can you
Maro
get
is
him to
muted.
unmute?
I don't know if the cat has hit your mute button there.
Oh,
So is
okay,
this-
okay. So,
Welcome.
sorry. Thank you very much. How are you?
Good. What you got for us?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
What have you got for us today? Are you presenting
okay.
a god or a goddess?
Yes, I have an
you
argument for
should-
God.
Okay.
Get out of the streets. People are honking. You might be in the way.
Okay, so my argument is about the Quran is mentioning the neutrino star.
The what?
The neutrino star was discovered in like
Where does the Quran mention this?
what it's in chapter 86.
Verse
and
what?
What?
We're not all familiar with the Quran. Can you read the specific verse and especially the part where names the star?
Verse what? What's the verse?
Verse from 1 to 3, chapter 86.
Can you read it for us?
Yes, I read it in Arabic because I don't rely on the translations out there. Okay.
Well, I've got it pulled up now.
I can
it
read
says,
the
quote,
English. I've got the English pulled up right here.
Yeah. By the heaven and the nightly star, and what will make you realize what the nightly star is, it is the star of piercing brightness.
Okay, so the translation is somewhat translated the name of the star to nightly star. Okay.
Is in the verse, is there anything that specifies the location of the star?
Well, the location is not mentioned. No.
So how do you get from a star to a specific star if the location isn't mentioned?
Well, because it's as I'm making the point, the translation is wrong because it says in
I'm not talking
Arabic.
about the translation. I'm talking about the fact that you have a verse mentions a star, it doesn't mention any location, and then you say it mentions this specific star in that location. How do you get from A to B?
Well, because it didn't mention a specific star. You need the location if you were referring to a specific star. Okay, so in this case, he doesn't mention.
Which is what you're doing. You said the Quran mentions this specific star. And
Yes,
I'm asking
as
you, if the verse doesn't mention a specific star, it doesn't even mention a location, it doesn't mention a name, how do you get from that to the Quran mentioning a specific star in a specific location with a specific name? Why didn't the Quran mention any of that?
well, I didn't make this claim. I make this claim. I make a claim that a kind of star was discovered, not a specific star.
Yeah, there's nothing in
The
this verse that even remotely resembles
there's nothing
the
in
characteristics of a
the verse
neutron
that,
star.
So
yeah.
this is really
yes,
odd.
yes,
So,
because
from my understanding of the Quran, the specific verse that you're talking about, while lexically it is singular, it's not the word, and I couldn't even hope to pronounce it. But while lexically it's singular, it's not implying any one particular star, but stars in the generic sense. That the fact that it's essentially saying that because there are stars in the sky, and those stars are illuminated, and those stars don't fall out of the sky, they don't disappear, they don't wander off and vanish, that they're constant, that there must be something holding them in place and maintaining their illumination and their consistency, and that from that assumption is that there is a being or something that is holding them there. And so essentially what the surah is, what this particular surah is stating, is that it looks like this and there is consistency, and or you could say even order to it, so therefore there's something maintaining that, and that thing is Allah.
And
Is
no,
what
and
this
it's
surah is
also
basically
wrong
stating.
because stars are not consistent. We
Well,
see stars
they're consistent. I mean,
die.
obviously, stellar rotation would be, but we're talking about when this thing was written. So yeah, there is some variation there, and the stars do kind of move because stellar progression. But from their perspective, they're looking up there. Like if you look at the North Star, in the very small, it takes like 6,000 years for that thing for us to get a new North Star. So from when they're looking at it, they say, "Oh, the stars they see the same patterns every single day." And so therefore the stars don't move, they're constantly there. So it's what is holding them in place. So it's basically just offering up Allah as a reason as to why the sky, in the limited perception of time that they had that this was written, they're looking up and saying, well, the stars are there, they're consistent, they're illuminated, they don't like vanish. So what is keeping them consistent? And that thing that's keeping them consistent is Allah. Is that essentially that's what this surah is stating?
No, let me make my point very clear. I'm not talking about the locations, and I'm talking about a specific kind of stars. It's called the neutrino star. Because in Arabic, the word tariq means knocking. Okay, it translates
It means
to the knocking
sorry.
one.
It means what? It means
Knocking,
what?
knocking,
Knocking, knock, knock, knock. Who's there?
Yeah,
I'm going online trying to find anything about this, and this is really weird. I see some like source saying that the piercing star scientists lately discovered that they are pulsating, and then it goes into the verse, but there's no relation, right? It's just like, oh, scientific miracle, let's go.
No, because the knocking, he named it the knocking one. So knocking one
Why
is
didn't he name? Why didn't he name it the neutron star? Didn't you know?
Well,
I have the translation as the piercing star.
Don't
this is from the Surah At-Tariq 86 1 through 17, and it talks about what do you know what so by the heaven and the night visitor, what do you know what the night visitor is? It is the piercing star, but it's not referring to any one particular star. It's saying that the stars that pierce the night, that they are there and they're constant.
No.
It's not talking about any one particular individual star. It's talking about stars in the general sense.
No, verse 1. Read the translation for verse 1.
By the
What?
heaven and the night visitor. What do you
No,
know
no.
what the night visitor is?
Listen.
This
The
is
word in
why
Arabic.
I asked Maro.
The word
Maro,
in Arabic.
This is why I asked you to read the verse and translate it for us, because then we would at least know what you are reading.
Okay.
You see
Okay,
how
I'll
that
read
is
it.
helpful? And the fact that you constantly say, well, it's verse this and this, that's great, but we will all be looking at different websites with different translations, coming up with different things, and we still wouldn't get what you are reading. So it would really be helpful if you read the verses not in Arabic, but the translation you have for that in English.
Okay. It reads in Arabic والسماء والطارق. It translated it for and heaven and the knocking one. The word at-tariq means someone who knocks or are knocking something or person.
Neutron stars don't knock on anything.
Yeah, what do the stars knock on?
Well, this is what the scientists say, that neutrino stars are pulsating this every
Pulsating is
second
not
or
knocking.
every.
Pulsating is not knocking. What are the stars knocking on? And
Dude, this is such a reach. Like, I'm looking at sources
Yeah.
that agree with you, and this is such a reach.
Listen, bro, pulsating,
It's like,
pulsating, or pulsating
is not knocking. It's not
even if it
knocking.
was pulsating, this is such a reach. Like,
Yeah, pulsating is not knocking. So how do you get to knocking? What is the star
even if it was
knocking
correct,
on?
dude, it's such a reach, right? Like, I'm looking at like it's like 3 lines that are like the star at night. It's the piercing star. Do you not know of this or something like?
No.
There's nothing there, dude.
Listen, what's the Arabic translation for pulsating?
What is the Arabic translation for pulsating?
Knocking, like a tariq,
Knocking.
the name. Yes, the knocking is pulsating.
So a
Okay,
light
so
that goes a light that goes brighter and less bright, that is a knocking light. What's
no,
the
but
light knocking
because
on?
no, because it's not only light, it's an explosion. Okay.
I'm asking. I'm just sticking with the word pulsating. So pulsating is light that goes from brighter to less bright, back to brighter to less bright. That is pulsating light.
Which
So
technically would
what
be a
is the light knocking
a,
on?
It technically would be a pulsar, and it wouldn't be a neutrino or a neutron star, because
Yeah.
neutron stars don't do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
what is the light knocking on? How does knocking come into place?
So
well,
you're saying though that scientists agree with that claim, right?
no, it's describing the act of knocking. So
I have a question. Maybe that's helpful. So, did scientists find those stars by reading the Quran, or did scientists find those stars by observing the night sky?
I don't think that matters. But just to
No,
clarify, pulsars are
It does matter.
neutron
It
stars.
does matter. Hold on. No, TJump. It does matter.
No, it
Hold
doesn't.
on.
It literally
I'm getting
doesn't.
somewhere. I'm getting somewhere with my line of questioning. Please don't interrupt. So, Maro,
yes.
did the scientists read the Quran and then discover the star, or did they observe the night sky and discovered the star, and then some Muslim found a verse that lines up with it, and then 2 and 2, which aren't actually 2 and 2 together?
Yes, the first argument is right. They didn't read the Quran, then describe the star.
So what you did was hindsight, thinking, okay, this might look similar, So it's probably the reason, but the scientists didn't find the star because it was described in the Quran.
Yes, but we find it not similar. We find it fitting the description of the scientists.
No, it doesn't.
So
There-
do you
there are-
accept the scientists that say that the moon was never split? Because that is something that NASA claims did not happen.
No, this is another point. So we are talking about this point. So let's focus on this one.
It's a simple yes or no.
What I'm
Just
trying,
quick yes or no.
what I'm trying to point out is Mauro, is that the scientists didn't discover the stars because the Quran described them. You retrofit the Quran into a finding that science has made.
Yes,
and it's not even a good fit.
Why it's not a good fit?
There's so
Because
much background noise in your mic, Mauro.
Yeah.
So there's tons of different kinds of stars that all pulsate. It's not just neutron stars, and there's stars
Yeah,
that flicker in the night
exactly.
sky. They get dimmer and lighter in the night sky. And so, say that it didn't say anything about neutron stars. It didn't say they were made of one type of particle. It didn't say anything specifically relating to neutron stars whatsoever. It just says there's
Mauro,
a light
can
that
you
flicker.
mute when you're not speaking, because the background noise is awful.
So,
Go ahead, TJump.
Muhammad looking at the sky and seeing that some lights flicker and saying, "Oh, look, a dimming star," is not a prediction of a neutron star. For him to predict a neutron star, he'd have to literally say, "This is a neutron, and there's a star made of only these." And he did not say that. So, no, there's nothing in the Quran that predicts neutron stars. But neutron stars are pulsars. Pulsars are neutron stars.
I really want to know if you accept.
Binary star systems also pulsate,
Yep.
which points to two different stars, which is also not mentioned in that particular verse that you're reading.
Yeah, there's lots
I
of
mean,
kinds of
I
stars.
really want to know how consistent his view is, right? Because he's saying that he accepts the scientific findings there for that verse. So do you accept the scientific findings that disagree with Quran 54, verse 1 to 10, that both say that the moon was never split and that the Noah's flood never happened? Do you accept both the scientific findings on those?
Well, I can't find a scientific paper on this topic. You know.
Then you're not looking hard enough.
No, if you
So
if
you
you
don't
provide
accept the scientific consensus in regards to Quran 54, 1 to 10.
if you would provide a scientific paper on the moon never split it.
Yeah, NASA said the moon never split. That's a claim that NASA made, who is probably the most advanced organization in regards to space, besides maybe like Elon Musk's what are the space?
SpaceX is not more advanced than NASA. What?
Probably not. Probably not. But I'm just saying.
Yes, there are tons of scientific papers that did display the origin of the moon and how it became the way it was and the shape it was and the distances was. Absolutely, all of them reject the idea that it split in half, because that would completely change the physics. The way it got the way it was has nothing to do with any kind of splitting. There's no splitting.
Okay, so I need to read this paper.
Okay, origin of the moon.
Of course.
Not just some scientists working at NASA and said that the moon never split. I need to read his paper and read his
origin of the moon,
evidence
Harvard
for
University
such thing.
Courses.
So I need to
You
read
haven't read any
his
papers
evidence.
on neutrino stars because you didn't know what you were talking about. You just accept it because it coheres with the Quran, and then when the consensus disagrees with the Quran, you reject it and you say, I haven't seen the evidence. But you haven't even seen the evidence for the other one, which is why you don't know it's not the same.
No, because I know the scientists are describing the neutrino star, and it fits the description exactly. So
no, it doesn't.
So
it's not the same, dude. That's what we're saying.
Well, there's a binary star system, so now it describes two different things. So the Quran is too vague. Is that what you're saying?
No,
because the verse could apply to different stars and not to the one that you mentioned.
No, because the Quran mentions a knocking star and a
Which is a
piercing.
binary star, which is a binary star system, which also pulsates.
There are
Yeah, what?
thousands and thousands of different kinds of stars that all pulsate. They all do that. Most of them do that.
Yeah.
There, I gave you
Oh,
a source
yeah.
on the origin of the moon.
You can
The moon was
literally
not
look
split.
up at the night sky and see the stars pulsating any day you want,
Okay.
or any evening you want to.
Okay, so
It's
so
just an observation that they could have made back then, and see pulsating stars, and then put those into the Quran. It's not a new discovery. It is
no,
Let's
something
just
that we've
grant
known.
piercing
That
can
we've
we-
light.
known.
Let's
That
just
we've
I just wanna
known
wait.
before
piercing light
science.
references
The moment
like
the moment
a
moment
supernova,
people
right?
started looking up at the sky, they saw that. So how's this special?
Can we just just really quickly? Can we I don't know, this doesn't even if Morrow was correct and the Quran somehow accurately described a specific kind of star, right? Astronomy was not, that old in the 1400s. I mean, we know that Eratosthenes discovered the Earth was a globe 3,000 years before the Quran was ever written, right? So these sort of groundbreaking discoveries did happen prior to the necessary technological advancements to confirm them. But it's not like it would convince any of us, even if the Quran did have a passage that accurately described the neutron star, that this must be God inspired then, because there's other instances in the Quran where they get things wrong, scientifically speaking. This isn't very distinct from what 7th century people would have understood in the first place. Yeah, the star is twinkling. We can all see twinkling stars in the sky. But even if it were the case that this was an accurate representation of a neutron star specifically, I don't see how that would get us to God exists. Just
Yeah,
because
it'd have
a guy
to
wrote in a
entail
book
some information
means-
that was not accessible to the time period. Blinking is they
And
they,
you-
they had accessible blinking. They could see blinking stars. That's not rare. If they literally said neutrons, that'd be impressive.
well, okay,
And they
blinking.
described what it means to be a neutron star, yeah.
Okay, blinking is something, and piercing, because he described it in the third verse in the piercing star. So piercing means something goes through something. Okay, so something piercing something. So
Okay, well, neutron stars don't
as
do
in
that.
light piercing the dark, which is what every star does, not only pulsating stars. So
Also
again,
very common poetic language.
nothing specific.
No, because listen, the scientists saying is gamma rays are piercing through matter. Okay, so
Yes,
they are
gamma
describing.
rays come from literally every star. So again, nothing specific. You're
No,
trying to
but when you
retrofit. You're trying to retrofit something, and make it specific to one single kind of star when that is not the case.
well, because it talks about knocking and piercing at the same star, you cannot find.
And it probably is talking about light piercing the dark. So what?
No, it's shining. If you are saying shining is not piercing.
I'm
Okay,
not.
so tell me the
this
verse.
semantic
tell me the
nonsense
verse.
is not getting us anywhere. Nobody's convinced.
And
We
despite
can-
the
we please
fact,
move on?
despite the
easily
fact
get-
that
Please move
knocking,
on,
despite
please.
the fact that it hasn't been brought up that knocking
can-
is determined by sound. That you hear knocking.
Yeah, we can easily get
That's
through
knocking,
this.
and that
Maro.
Can
we not-
and that stars are visual. That humans can't hear stars. Okay,
Yeah,
knocking is something that is audio, not.
Excuse me,
So,
Maro. Were you? Did you have a link to share? If you could post it in the Heathen Hangout. There's some people asking, and also a couple of people said they liked your background noise.
And I have a specific question for you, Maro. I have a specific question for you because you keep coming up with things. So, what's the verse in the Quran that mentions gamma rays specifically?
It's the third verse. It says the piercing
gamma
star.
rays?
So
It says gamma
no,
rays?
it says piercing star. It's piercing.
Yeah, so let's get to the
Piercing
verse that
entails-
mentions. No. Let's get to the verse that mentions gamma rays specifically.
I'm telling you, piercing entails something is
No, it does
piercing.
not.
Yes. If I have a toothpick and I pierce my skin, that's also piercing. You are talking about gamma rays. You said it's mentioned in the Quran, so please provide the verse where it specifically mentions gamma rays. Not something that can be explained by a toothpick and skin, because that's also piercing.
All forms of radiation are piercing.
English.
Neutrinos are piercing. All forms of light can go past through your skin.
Yeah.
Like if you hold your hand up, you can see light through your skin. All forms of light are piercing.
No.
I'm reading this in English, and
Oh my
I'm
God.
thinking supernova. They saw a supernova, and then they're like,
please move on.
"Yeah, like this is ridiculous."
I think
Listen,
Peter.
when
I think Peter is correct on this. That it's another case of taking contemporary science and then fitting the Quran to it. So trying to go back and be like, oh well, they obviously meant this because this is what we now know to be true. So this is what they meant when they wrote when the Quran was written.
No,
There's a name for it. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy. You got an impact and then you paint the bullseye around it. That is literally what you're doing, Mauro.
No, the equation in this. Listen, bro. The equation in these 3 verses is telling you about a kind of star that's knocking.
No, it isn't. That's what we're trying to point out. It isn't. It's
listen
literally.
to me,
You can literally apply that to billions of stars and billions of different stars. We just pointed that out.
No, bro.
So
there's no star.
Ultimately, I don't think we can go any further. I don't think that we can go any further with it. We still have people who have their hands up, and so for the sake of time, I think we may have to move on. But Mauro, yeah, unfortunately, what it appears to be, at least I think to the majority of us, is that you are essentially going back. You're saying you're taking contemporary science, and then you are molding it to, or you're molding the Quran to fit what we now know to be true. So I think it's time that we have to move on there. It's not convincing, maybe convincing to you, but we've demonstrated the flaw in that reasoning. So
I am willing to bet $1,000 right now that Mauro does not believe in God because this particular passage describes a neutron star.
What about the expansion of the universe? We're
not going on to a different topic. You've wasted our time long enough with this star nonsense. If you thought that the expansion of the universe was described in the Quran and that this was stronger evidence, you would have started with that, but you didn't. So we're gonna move on.
Thank you for coming up. We do appreciate
Thanks,
your time.
Mauro.
Let's go back to Zero. He says that his audio problems are fixed.
Okay.
Main screen turn on. How are you?
All right.
Turn on,
Zero, you're up again, man.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
In fact,
we get signal.
What you got for us today?
You've got for us the Kalam cosmological argument. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to start really quickly here and say that the problem that I have with the Kalam cosmological argument is that it doesn't have a reference to a god, but if you can connect those dots as part of your presentation, then I'll be very interested.
Connected to like...
It might be helpful if you state your version of the Kalam, because there are different versions, so state yours so we can address yours specifically and not a
well, there's different versions of the cosmological argument.
Yeah, let's start by letting him give the argument. Go ahead, give the argument. What is your argument?
Yeah, I'm Christian, but I'm arguing for deism.
That's okay. What's the argument?
The universe, known as everything, must have a cause. The universe cannot have caused itself.
Wait, go back. Hold up. You said the universe known as everything. That was your first premise?
Yeah, I'm defining the universe as everything.
Would that would include
why must the universe have a cause?
Wait. So if you're defining the universe as everything, that includes God.
No, I'm defining.
Okay, we need to step back and just perhaps let Zeroing complete the argument, and then we can address the premises.
Okay, yeah, the universe known as everything must have a cause. The universe cannot have caused itself. Yeah, since the universe could not have caused itself, there must be an external cause. Which is timeless, causeless, eternal, because time is within the universe. A timeless, causeless, eternal being must be God, and this being must be intelligent, because a non-intelligent being cannot propel itself, it must be acted on. And since it's timeless, causeless, eternal, and intelligent, it must be God.
So first thing,
okay, so the universe is everything. How do you get to something that is
guys, whoa, there's way too many people trying to jump on this at once.
Guys, come on.
Unreal. Okay. Zero. Let me ask you a question, man. When you say the universe, why do you believe that that requires a cause? What's your argument that it requires a cause?
Because in order for the universe to begin to exist, in order for the universe to exist, it cannot have caused itself, because then it would have to exist
Well,
before
we're not saying that it caused itself. We're asking, why does it require a cause?
Why does it require a cause? Why does the universe require a cause?
Why
Yeah,
is it
why
not
does it require a
uncaused? It can be
cause?
uncaused. It's uncaused thing. Universe is uncaused. What's the problem with that?
Because at some point it must have begun to exist.
Why?
Why? How do you know
Why
that?
must it have done that?
Because its existence, it is matter. Matter cannot be created. As
Wait,
we
so
know
your
from-
argument that matter can't be created, so therefore an intelligent, disembodied mind created matter. What?
Actually,
How do you discount from Max?
ignoring everything
Can
else.
you?
I'm still confused by one other flaw. If the universe is everything that exists, then what exists that isn't part of that everything?
God, he exists outside of everything. He is external.
So,
That doesn't make any sense.
if God exists, then he's part of everything that exists, correct?
I would rather define it like God. Like I defined him as eternal, timeless, and causeless.
Yeah,
Which
but that
means
doesn't.
You started out your argument with the universe.
Oh my
is
goodness!
everything
Way
that
too many people
exists,
talking at
and
once.
then there's everything that exists plus another thing that exists that isn't part of the everything. So everything isn't everything. Everything is everything minus one thing. It doesn't line up.
Yeah, because I'm defining God as external. He's external.
Okay, that's
So he
fine.
doesn't.
I'm
He
not worried
doesn't
about.
exist.
Okay,
God-
Peter. Obviously,
God
when Zero
doesn't
says everything
exist.
that exists, he's referring to all physical reality.
I'm
And
just
God is
pointing out the flaw in his
ontologically
I'm just pointing out the flaw in his argument.
Yes, we understand that, but what I'm trying to do is start at premise one. Premise one is the universe must have had a cause. I'm starting there at the first premise. So I want Zero. I want you to substantiate why it is the case that the universe must have a cause.
Because the law of conservation of energy, or the law of conservation of mass, states that you cannot create something from nothing. Energy cannot be created.
Okay, if the universe, if there was
doesn't say that.
never a state of affairs where the universe didn't exist, then it wasn't created from nothing. It just always was.
Repeat that?
And the laws you're
If
mentioning
there was a state of
only
affairs,
apply
hold on, Peter. If there was a state of affairs, or if there was never a state of affairs wherein the universe did not exist, meaning that it has always been here in some form or another, then there's no violation of any of these entropic principles.
No, and the laws you're mentioning are only
Peter,
applicable
please let him
in
respond.
our known universe. In our known universe, not in anything
Hey,
else.
we gotta let him respond.
Okay, so are you implying that the universe could have been eternal?
There's nothing to suggest that it couldn't have been. So you're arguing that it must be the case necessarily that the universe has a cause. I am positing an alternative explanation, right? Can you demonstrate to me why it is impossible that the universe is a causal?
Because essentially, like, if the universe did not have a cause, as you were saying, or is you're like offering, then like what would be like the causal link? I suppose.
There's not one. That's the point. Here's the problem, Zero. Like cause and effect, the way that we observe that within our local experience of reality, that isn't like some law that imposes itself on the universe. That is a principle that we are able to deduce from the interactions of extant things, right? But the problem that you're immediately going to run into when you try to make the argument that the universe was caused is that causation is a relationship between two things. So there was a state of affairs.
You're cutting out, Xerxes.
The universe did not exist, and that God, whatever you define that to be, somehow facilitated its existence without affecting anything. That's not a causal relationship. That's not causality in any way that we would be able to coherently understand it. So you're taking a principle or process that we observe in reality, changing it to a way that's completely unrecognizable, and then demanding that the rules be applied the same, when you're necessarily changing them already. If the universe did not exist at some point, God couldn't have affected anything to create the universe. So whatever process God used to facilitate the existence of the universe would not have been causation. So any inductive argument you use from this point forward relating to causation is going to intrinsically be fallacious, because you're going to have to change the rules when it comes to the universe, because it's not going to apply the same way that it does to all the things that we observe within the universe.
Okay, I never said that God like created something, took something and then created the universe. Why is it impossible that God could have simply, like, since I'm defining the universe as like physical, correct? God could have simply created everything, which includes like the law of conservation of energy, the law of conservation of mass, which would mean he
Okay,
could
my point zero is that if God creates these things, he is creating them out of nothing, which is not causality as we understand it, nor can we even conceive of that kind of a process. It would be incoherent to us even if we were to watch it happen. It would be indistinguishable from God just being there and the universe popping into existence, right? You have to make an argument as to why God would be the efficient cause there. Otherwise, it's not coherent, because when we look at causality in our local experience, we have a multitude of different causes. You have your efficient cause, which you think is what God is for the universe, and that's the initiator or the actor that starts the cause and effect relationship. But when we observe causality in our local experience, we also have a material cause, which is the medium out of which the cause and effect relationship is made. So if I were to give you an analogy, take a table, for instance, right? The efficient cause would be the actor that is creating the table, so the carpenter or the act of carpentry. The material cause would be the wood, glue, lacquer, and nails that the table is made of. So the carpenter reassembles all of these things into the table. And then the formal cause would be the table itself. And then the final cause would be whatever the carpenter created the table for, but that one's not entirely relevant to what we're talking about here. So what you are arguing is that God is the efficient cause and the universe is the formal cause, but you're excluding the material cause. You want to say that God just created the universe out of absolutely nothing. He just did it somehow, which is not a mechanic that any of us can comprehend. It's utterly devoid of content or meaning compared to how we presently understand causality. So you're not arguing for causality here. When I ask you why did the universe require a cause, I'm asking you for the efficient and the material cause of the universe, and you just want to give me the efficient cause. You're trying to argue that you can hit a home run without a ball, but you can't hit a home run without a bat. So please explain to me how the universe can be causal if there was ever a state of affairs where it didn't exist.
Way too much technical language there. I don't know if you followed that. So why does the universe need to be created at all? Why can't it be eternal? Why God? Why can't it be better than God?
Because it could not have always existed.
Why?
Because if it always existed, meaning if it existed for an infinite amount of time, there would be an infinite amount of time between the moment, like there would be an infinite amount of time before this this current moment.
So,
which means
So-
we've gotten to this moment.
Yes, we
No,
could have.
I do have a question for you, Zeroing. You're saying it's one God that created this?
I kind of want to go down this line of reasoning first before you go off on a side route. So
Sure, okay, TJump. Go ahead.
So yes, there can be an infinite past and we can still reach the point of right now. So saying that there's an infinite past doesn't mean we can't get to the present moment. There's no reason to think that because there's infinite past moments that we could never get to the present moment.
Wait, why?
Because there's an infinite number of things between 1 and 2, but we still get to 2. So like there's an infinite number of points like on the edge of a circle, but we can still get to the edge of the circle. So infinite is a set. It's a complete set. So if you like say 0.99999, there's infinitely many nines there. But how does it get to 1? Well, it means 1. It is the complete set before this moment. So if you say infinite, what you're saying is the complete set before this moment. So if there's an infinite amount of time before this moment, then you still get to this moment.
The problem, like, so you brought up 1 and 2. Yeah, there's an infinite amount of numbers between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
However, in order to get to 2, you'd have to like 2 is essentially like inaccessible if you're going by 1.999, 1.9. Like if you're going by that.
You're always going to be at some number. So imagine if you start counting at 1 is 1.000001. Well, how did you get to 1.00001? There's infinitely many numbers before that. Well, you had to start counting somewhere. There has to be a number with a start. So even if there's an infinite past and the past started infinitely in the past, We're there. We're at the present moment. We're at the counting moment. So there has to be a present moment. Even if there's an infinite past, there's going to always be at least one present moment, and we're in it.
Okay, so are you claiming that? Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. That because that there can be an infinite amount of like past, but we can still reach the present because of like it can still happen, I guess. I'm not like I didn't follow exactly what you said, but I can understand like the logic behind it.
Yeah. So if there's an infinite past, at some point in the past, sometime it was the present. So if you're saying you can't get to the present moment, what you're saying is that the present moment is before now. It's like a million years, a billion years before now. And so how could we ever get from that present moment to this present moment? But that means there's already a present moment. There has to be a present moment at some point. And that one has infinite much time before it too. So there's always going to be a present moment somewhere, and we're in it.
But like, okay, so what about before? What about before? Like before we exist, essentially. Like, how would that be considered the present moment?
What was present isn't based on our consciousness. It's based on reality. So reality is the present moment, whatever is currently happening in reality.
I'm not talking about our consciousness. Existence is like fact.
Right. So like whatever exists at any point in time, that is the present moment.
We are part of this universe or this cosmos, and it doesn't matter whether we're here or not. We see people come and go throughout our lives, and the universe carries on. I'm curious, zeroing about the argument you're putting forward, because it sounded like you're saying that there's one deity created it all. Have you got reason to think that it's only one and not a group of multiple deities that did it? Like, why would one argument be more compelling than the other in this case?
Why would there be multiple deities? God can create like other deities. There can be a God that creates them. Wow, like are you saying they could exist at like all at the same moment?
Well, so you're saying that our cosmos or our universe was created by one deity, and I'm asking how you know for certain that it wasn't created by a group of deities, multiple deities working together, instead of just one deity doing it all on their own.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's more more you have to go into if you claim that there's more than one deity that's doing it all.
Okay, but how do you? But I mean, is there something that we can look at to know for certain that it was indeed only one deity that created this universe and not multiple deities?
There's nothing for sure, but it's simpler, more reasonable to say it was one deity.
Oh, okay, so what you're
Why?
doing is you're favoring the explanation that sounds simpler. Is that correct?
What's even
Yes.
simpler is to not even consider a god. That's even simpler.
Occam's
You're not
razor.
going with that.
Go ahead, King Xerxes.
Yeah, it's called Occam's razor when you favor the simplest explanation. If there's lesser assumed variables, the explanation with the lesser assumed variables. Now, again, this actually only applies to a paradigm wherein you have two equally valid explanations for a particular phenomenon, but one of them has lesser assumptions than the other. And Occam's razor is predicated that the explanation with the least amount of assumptions is going to be the more likely explanation. But the problem here is that when it comes to the origins of the universe, anything we could posit about the origins of the universe would be an assumption because we just simply don't know. We have plenty of physical models to explain how certain origins or catalysts might have occurred, but what we don't have is any precedent for something that exists that doesn't bear any of the same characteristics as the universe or as existence the way we observe it, and somehow facilitated a state of affairs, a transition in state of affairs wherein the universe did not exist to a state of affairs wherein the universe did exist. We have no evidence whatsoever that there was ever such a state of affairs where the universe didn't exist, or that the universe could have arrived from a state of non-existence like that. It's just incoherent to us. So you have hundreds of assumptions for any kind of God creating the universe, whereas we don't assume anything when we just posit that perhaps the universe wasn't created at all, other than maybe the universe wasn't created. That's our singular assumption.
I gotta go. Thanks, guys. Randall, try giving the intro at the end. See if that helps with any of the boost things. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Really